Wonderful to see a full auditorium here at Hanaholmen, and hello to all of you watching the live stream as well. My name is Annastina Haapasaari, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we begin, just a few practical notes. Today's program will be conducted in Finnish, Swedish, and English. The live stream will be available in English, but here, those of you attending the event here in person will have the option to choose between all three languages. So there will be simultaneous interpretation. What you need now is a headset where you can switch between the channels. Channel number 1 will be English, channel number 2 Finnish, and channel number 3 will be Swedish. If you don't have a headset yet, please raise your arm and one of the staff members will bring a headset to you. And after the break, there will be also headsets available at both entrances. The emergency exit is here to your left-hand side, just in case. Now, you probably already know what this event is all about. Established 9 years ago, Hanalys has become an annual high-level foreign policy forum bringing together people across society to discuss, to debate, to shape thinking and build shared understanding. And that is exactly what we will be doing today. You also know where you are. You are at Hanaholmen, the Swedish-Finnish Cultural Center. And that means that we will also have a lens today through which we look at the world. It will be a Swedish-Finnish lens. But what is that lens? Does it mean that we will all need to put on our rose-tinted glasses now? That might have been the case a while back, but maybe that time is over. So maybe this is more of a through a glass darkly type of situation. Well, we'll see soon. But first, let me hand it over to Gunvor Kronman, the director of Hanaholmen. Please.
Oh, sorry.
Wrong notes.
So, Your Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished speakers, kära vänner och hyvät ystävät. Ni är alla varmt välkomna till.
You are all warmly welcome to Hanaholmen. This is a place which more than over half a century has been a meeting point for building trust, dialogue and collaboration between Finland and Sweden. Time and again we have shown that when building relationships across borders we are strengthening both our security and our prospects for the future. When we initiated the Hanalys dialogue in 2017 as part of the 100th anniversary of Finland, we faced a number of challenges. The war in eastern Ukraine, the first Trump administration taking office, and uncertainties for the transatlantic alliance caused, and an EU that showed signs of division. At the time, we were still happily unaware of what was awaiting. As we meet today, this world is characterized by an extreme uncertainty and rapid change. The global power relations are displaced and the economic maps are redrawn. Alliances and partnerships are destroyed, and what earlier was considered as stable dependencies are increasingly to be seen as vulnerabilities with technologies moving. We can really see this more as a vulnerability today. In this new reality, policymaking is no longer based only on economic activities, but also on considerations on strategy and security policy. Geoeconomy has become a new key concept in international policymaking. It is a specific dilemma for such countries as Finland and Sweden, but it is also a great opportunity for us. At this difficult moment, it is also important to look at the positive side, how the Nordic region reinvents itself, how new relations emerge. We are open and expert-driven economies in the Nordics. Our well-being is based on trade, innovation, and integration into global value chains. At the same time, we are in a weaker security situation than perhaps ever before after the end of the Second World War. The international rules are rewritten and the transatlantic relations are put to question so that Europe is forced to think properly how we should position ourselves in this turbulent world. This raises crucial questions. How can we be open but not vulnerable? How can we be competitive without compromising our values? How can Finland and Sweden together contribute to the establishment of a more stable and fair European and global geoeconomic order? Today, we have to find new alliances and cooperate differently. And one example is Mario Draghi, who has launched a pragmatic federalist doctrine for Europe, which starts from the point that those who are willing to cooperate should act as rapidly as the superpowers. That is how the smaller common denominator is not the one that is guiding Nordic cooperation, but the one who wishes to take actions. And this would give us an opportunity for new democratic structures. The world is not black and white, as the Prime Minister Carney reminded us in Davos in his iconic speech. He said that we should take an open look to the world without nostalgia and see cooperation where cooperation willingness exists. And today, Hanalys brings together political leaders, different people, young people, where we together think how we can best navigate in this unpredictable world, which is multipolar. Poles are relocated and the compass needle is spinning around. Our goal is not only to understand changes, but also actively influence them together. Sweden and Finland have a lot to win in deepening our strategic cooperation in trade, technology, economic security and certainty, and more importantly, in our European regional cooperation. Our joint strength is reliant on trusting each other, anchoring ourselves to the rules-based international order, and we are willing to think on a long-term basis. I'd like to express my great thanks to the ministers for Foreign Affairs, and the ministries for our long-term far-sighted cooperation. In particular, we are glad over the great experiences and positive feedback having organized Hanalys in Sweden a year ago. Hanalys is a Swedish-Finnish institution now, a genuinely bilateral dialogue, and we hope that this rotation of our host organizations will become an integrated part of our Hanalys concept, providing a further credibility and a strength to the bilateral cooperation. But now, dear friends, let's start now with this year's program. And with these words, I wish us all a very productive and constructive debate here today. Thank you and welcome once again.
Tack så mycket, Gunvor, for setting
Thank you, Gunvor, for setting us the scene.
thematic today. Now, without further ado, I have the pleasure and the honor to welcome on stage our two countries' ministers for foreign affairs that are actually hosting us today. So we will start with Minister Elina Valtonen's speech, ready when you are.
Ärade minister, bästa Maria.
Distinguished Minister, dear Maria, dear parliamentarians, Ladies and gentlemen, Gunvor, dear friends. Cooperation between Finland and Sweden is now more important than ever. These are not my words. This is something that politicians, corporate leaders, leaders of NGOs have said many times lately. We have heard it in speeches, in strategies, in many places for decades now, and it's very familiar to us. But now I think it is time to stop. At the official level, this is one of the things that has really now taken on a new shape. We have the 2024 joint declaration between Finland and Sweden, and it says that the relationship between our two countries is now more important than ever during modern times. And that is saying quite a lot. But it was carefully selected. Those words, I mean. I don't want to repeat myself, and I just want to say this. Every day, day by day, the meaning behind these words becomes more true, more topical, and that especially applies to foreign policy. And that is why I think it's so great that we can come here every year to this foreign policy forum, this Hanalys seminar, to talk about these things. I would like to thank Maria and her team for last year's Hanalys. That was the first time that it was organized in Sweden, but today we are here in Finland listening to the Swedish language with a Finnish accent. Dear friends, Russia is still continuing its war of aggression in Ukraine. Russia is using force. It's trying to establish its own spheres of influence, and I think that is the biggest and most long-term security threat towards our continent. And that is why our support to Ukraine must remain steadfast and strong. And at the same time, we have to increase pressure towards Russia and its war economy. The 20th sanctions package is key here. Together with my Swedish colleague, we have put forth a suggestion concerning a ban on providing services to the Russian shadow fleet. This proposal is included in the Commission's proposals as well. And that is, of course, very good, but it's also a symbol of the joint work that Finland and Sweden are doing to influence various bodies like the European Commission. We also have to increase defense in Europe, increase the deterrence that we can offer. And there I think we are taking steps into the right direction. European security strategy must reflect this new world. It has to reflect the instability, and it has to chart a way towards a more capable, stronger EU. These days we often talk about the link between geopolitics and the economy. You cannot bypass this link. It will become more and more important in the future. And that is why when talking about foreign and security policy, we also have to talk about economic growth and competitiveness. And one of the key things here relate to our defense spending. Economic growth is key so that we have the money to invest in our own defense at the level that is now required. So we need resources for this defense spending. These resources do not grow on trees. So that is why I would like to focus on certain areas, certain priorities that have an impact on our economy and on our security. The first one is the EU's internal market. We here in the Nordic countries have for a long time realized what are the benefits of free markets, free mobility. We have had joint Nordic labor markets since 1954, and we have been a pioneer, a role model for the EU's markets where there's free movement of labor, for example. And these days, the EU's internal market is the bedrock of the EU's financial or economic, and also its military power. We have 450 million consumers in this area, and we have 26 million companies in the EU that together employ almost 128 million people. So this is the biggest common market in the world. That is why our objective is to reinforce the internal market. And that means that we have to have seamless internal digital markets so that not only people and goods move freely, but capital and services can do that as well. We have seen this in services. That is working reasonably well, but in terms of the free movement of capital, there is still a lot of work to be done. The Capital Markets Union is important here, as we all know. And if we have stagnant money, that means that the economy is stagnant as well. So first we need capital. We need capitals to come in so that they can then generate more and more capital. The Commission has put forth a savings and investment union proposal, and that's very welcome. The worrying international situation has led to the fact that there are now more obstacles in our internal market than ever before. The Nordic countries have some experience on how to tackle these barriers. And that is why we can set an example here. We must find the solution how to tackle these internal barriers in the Nordic countries and within the EU. And Finland and Sweden can take a leading role here. Free trade is important because our goal is to focus on external partners. Economic growth requires trade and commerce, and that is why free trade agreements are so important. Because the FTAs and commerce, that helps us spread our own values, reinforce our value chains, and that all then reinforces our own security. Now we have the Mercosur agreement and the agreement with India. Those are ready, and the next countries in line are Malaysia, Thailand, United Arab Emirates, and the Philippines. Those are the next countries in line. And then also Australia will be among the next countries that we would like to have a free trade agreement with. And I am happy that cooperation in the Pacific region, for example, is now increasing. Dear friends, Sweden is the closest ally that Finland has, and that can also be seen in political speeches, but also in practice. 2 weeks ago, my colleague, Maria, gave this speech in Brussels in our Council of Foreign Ministers. She spoke for Sweden, but also for Finland. And that's both a practical solution and a symbolic gesture. It's about practical cooperation without a lot of pomp and ceremony. But there are certain things that are there between Finland and Sweden. On Friday, we have an exciting ice hockey match coming when Finland and Sweden face off. And I think that will be an exciting match. And let's hope the best team wins. But these friendly rivalries, they are a good basis for our cooperation. Cooperation between our two countries is now more important than ever, and we would like to deepen and reinforce that cooperation now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Valtonen. And now, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Sweden, Maria Malmer Stenergard. We're very keen to hear your thoughts now.
Kära Elina.
Dear colleagues, Elina, friends, unfortunately, to your disappointment, I'm not going to speak in Finnish. It feels so great to be here in Hanaholmen and to know that one can spend a whole day together with friends. and share not only old ideas and thoughts, but also test new ones. There are so few countries that can be so close to each other in foreign and security policy than Finland and Sweden. Hanalys shows how wide and deep our connection is, and as Elina said, cooperation between Finland and Sweden has never been more important than now. I'd like to thank you very much to both Hanaholmen and to Elina that we can meet again here. Many things have happened since we met in Lidingö last year. We've moved into a world which is more difficult to navigate. It is jerkier, it's ruder, harsher, and in this world, economy is the most important tool for exercising power. And we are competing for natural resources, technology, markets, for strategic leadership, and borders are vaguer, they are weaker than before. And we know that if we are one-sidedly depending on a certain economy, there's also a security risk, and we also felt it in many countries as one had to diminish the use of Russian oil. Now there are something else that we are experiencing, which is more groundbreaking. We are not using geoeconomic tools only to get economic advantages or national security, but also to reshape the international rules of the game. The global supply chains are being used as a tool to put a pressure on others, and we've seen also how the tariffs also in particular have made it, as well as also it is about the rare earth metals and battery components and how that then is used to control exports. And we've come to a crossroads. We have to think in a novel way, and we have to also reorganize ourselves with our nearest friends. We need a strategic and mental shift in Europe. The last year's crises have taught us when weakness is being exploited, it is a great pressure when we have to stand alone, and we saw this in the question of Greenland. EU started supporting Denmark and those member states that were threatened by tariffs, for instance, Finland and Sweden. And we noticed that we are clearly ready for counteractions, and that is needed. In certain situations, we have to stand up and express ourselves clearly. Unity, decisiveness are the key words when we want to defend our interests. The economic openness and transparency of Europe is also a great advantage, but if we don't have enough protection, we can also see that going against ourselves. And in this power-based global economy, there are new requirements for policymaking and for companies. We have to take the same approach as we've also taken for building our European defense. We cannot also survive without being strong enough and be respected. Therefore, we can also see dependencies which are economic and technical, which make us vulnerable, and we have to strengthen ourselves, for instance, in key sectors such as fossil-free energy, strategic technology, and critical raw materials. We have to diversify our global supply chains in geopolitically exposed areas such as, for instance, semiconductors and rare earth metals. That can only take place within Europe when we work together, and we have to strengthen our strategic cooperation with both countries inside and outside of Europe. And secondly, Europe must also provide an alternative for ever-increasing isolationism, protectionism, and uncertainty and security. We cannot just stand by passively when other parts of the world are breaking common united rules and standards. On the contrary, we'll have to also see new opportunities in new markets and new trade opportunities, and we also have to build this with trust. And from Europe, we also have to work together decisively to strengthen ties with those countries that are also sharing our values through partnerships, cooperation, and free trade agreements. And as Elina said, we've also taken great steps ahead with Mercosur and India. And we also have to achieve new agreements that will be established. And that is also only the way how we can then achieve our full potential. Europe has the reputation that is a bit slow, it is not innovative enough. And I consider that that picture must be diversified. We do have dynamics, we also have innovations in Europe, and in the Nordic countries we do know that there is nothing wrong with the European innovations capabilities and capacities. According to the WIPO of UN, the 3 most innovative countries amongst the 10 can be found in the Nordics, Sweden in the 2nd place, Finland in the 7th place, and Denmark in the 9th place. But we do have a scalability problem. The European innovations disappear far too often to other markets during the scale-up phase, so we have to also reduce the bureaucracy and its barriers. We have to also see that we have enough risk capital, harmonize the EU's inner market even more and be more rapid, and we have to make ties with countries that also have the same approach with ourselves. We need to be speedier, we need scalability, we need cooperation. The Swedish government is currently developing a strategic framework for economic security, and we are deepening our dialogue also between states, industry, and academia. We need to increase awareness about intelligence threats of non-wanted investments and acquisitions and dependencies of technology and illegal technology transfers. And that is necessary so that we can strengthen our economic security. But we also need to build our strategic resilience and competitiveness, and that is what we can start at our home base. This starts from the benefits that we can have together and our resources, and we can also have attractive strategic cooperation in Europe and outside of it. And there we see the potential for an increased Finnish-Swedish cooperation. We already work together in the fields of 5G and 6G in Europe and also internationally. And I'd like to see that together with Nordic and Baltic friends, we can also get more and stronger ecosystems within the strategic technologies. I'm speaking about these biotechnologies, space issues, critical raw materials, magnet manufacturing, green technology. We'd have to reduce our vulnerabilities and develop our strategic cooperation, and I can see it very happily that Finland and Sweden are doing this all together. And I'm expecting also the Olympic Games, and of course for us it is most important to win the Norwegians in skiing.
Tack så mycket. Now I think I will have to let you go. There are some important meetings also for the ministers waiting. But I've understood that we will have you back in the early afternoon and get a chance to ask some questions also then. So a big, big thank you and see you. Now it is time for our keynote of the day. It will be delivered online by Arancha, Gonzáles, Laya. And as a quick note, in order to not make this technically too complex, we will not be providing the interpretation for this part. Arancha is the Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po. She has also served as Minister for Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of her native Spain. Arancha, can you hear us somewhere? Yes, okay, we have you on the screen. Can you hear us? Not? Okay, but we can't hear you yet, so let's get that sorted out first. Okay, well, maybe you can try again.
Okay.
Okay,
Can you hear me
great.
now?
We can hear you now. Are we saying bonjour or buenos dias to you today?
I think we will stick to good morning because my Swedish and Finnish is not good enough.
Right.
And if I do this in Spanish, it's going to be challenging. So let's stick to English.
Well, it's good to get some more international perspective here. If you're ready, perhaps you could help us set the scene by painting a sort of a backdrop for our discussion today on a global level. A title I have here in my notes for your speech is Shifts in Global Power Relations Reshaping the Geoeconomic Landscape. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I was listening to the presentations by both ministers, and let me tell you that mine will be very much in line what I have heard this morning. In reality, Europe is in the eye of a big storm. And this storm has multiple fronts. It's raining from all fronts. It's raining very heavily from the Eastern Front, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine that obliges Europe to build a more serious deterrence in the form of greater defense and security capacities. It also obliges us, it has obliged us to rethink our energy mix, both of which are difficult, the industrial defense and security and the energy, both of which are difficult, but both of which provide, in my view, incredible opportunities for us to become a little bit more sovereign. The second front where it's raining is further to the east, is China, a partner that we know well on the trade landscape, a partner that is right now a very fierce competitor of ours in sectors on which we had thought we could build our industrial might for the future, which is on the green sector, on electric vehicles, on the solar sector, on the wind sector, on hydrogen, on biotech, and the rest. It's a competitor that very often does not behave on fair trade terms. Is a competitor with a formidable domestic market, with incredible scale, but with a domestic market that is subdued, with cutthroat competition at home that makes foreign markets be very important to keep the growth of the economy alive. The third front is a little bit more difficult for us Europeans, and we have to recognize this, is the US. Not only hostile towards trade, like we know from past episodes, but right now ready to coerce us, ready to use the interdependencies that we have built over decades with the US to achieve economic objectives, but also to achieve non-economic objectives, to achieve political objectives, or in the case of Greenland, as we've seen, to achieve sovereignty, which is, again, difficult for us to grapple. So it obliges all these three big fronts in this big storm, obliges us to recalibrate. Partly it has to be with managing fierce competition. Partly it's got to do with building buffers and building mechanisms to help us manage the weaponization of interdependencies. And partly it has to be to disconnect our economies, as is in the case of Russia, simply because it is our enemy on the front line. So in this, I want to also put to you that the global economy has built very strong ties over these last decades that are proving very difficult to undo. There is a logic in the manner in which the global economy works. There is a cost to undoing this logic, which is why what we are seeing is not a reduction of the global economy, is not the reduction of international trade, is even not the reduction of investment flows, which are up again after 2 years of stagnation. What we are seeing is that the logic of global markets interconnected, the logic of international trade that still provides incredible sources of growth, unemployment, continue also to function with many countries and partners around the world that are not interested in assuming a very high cost of disconnecting from these opportunities. And for the European Union, this has to be the starting point because international trade, breathing with the global economy, is over 20% of our GDP. And it's 1 in 7 jobs that we have internally. So this, in my view, has to be our starting point. It cannot be to disconnect from the global economy. It has to be in a better position to manage the risks of being present today in this much more complicated global economy. So a few suggestions for your consideration throughout the day. First, in my view, our agenda has to continue to rely heavily on building rules-based spaces for the economy and for international trade. This is not very fashionable with some partners, but this is very fashionable with many other partners. We've seen how much our partners in the Mercosur, our partner called India, our partner called Australia, our partner called Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, the Emirates, our partners in the CPTPP, our partners in Africa expect from us that we lead in a rules-based international trade order. So this is one area where, in my view, we have to double down. Now, doubling down means not only investing in the trade agreements, but also nurturing politically relationship with these partners. I was, for example, in a way, a bit disappointed that we did not have a greater political presence in the recent EU-CELAC leaders meeting. And I'm saying this not as a criticism, but more as a realization that for us Europeans and for Finland and Sweden, big trading partners, it's very important to be present to nurture this not only economic and trade relations, but also nurture the political relations that underpin our greater desire to be more connected from a trade, investment, innovation, raw materials, value addition, and the rest. Of course, in Europe, let's face it, we are going to bump into we will have a bit of bumpy roads. I think we have to make an effort with our agricultural sector if we want to have a robust trade agenda, as I think we should. And we probably have to be a little bit more serious in responding to the structural challenges that the agricultural sector faces, rather than using the agricultural sector to use trade as a hostage for the structural problems that they face, from labor to finance, from regulatory frameworks in the agricultural sector and the rest. I think we can do it, but we have to be mindful that there we've got a bit of a weak spot. The second part of our agenda has to be about being better at managing our core vulnerabilities. And I want to stress the word core, because it's the core that we have to look at if we want to continue to manage this balance between open and risk management. There we obviously have work to do, both on the infrastructure of international trade, whether it's international payment systems, whether it's the security and safety of maritime routes, whether it's undersea infrastructure, whether it's energy infrastructure. There we have to pay more attention. We've got to do this together. We've got to do this by investing together. I'm particularly concerned about the international payment systems, because this is as we have seen, an area that can be also quickly weaponized against us. And on this, we have an asset that others don't have. It's a currency that we also have in a way to protect by investing in international payment systems. We also have to do that for key inputs, whether it's essential materials, whether it's essential sectors of the industry, like semiconductors, which in my mind requires that Europe develops a serious strategy vis-a-vis China. At the moment, we have a diplomatic convention called It's China a Partner, a Competitor, and a Rival. I think we need to unpack this in the form of a strategy, probably needing to establish a little bit of a better rapport de force with China than we have been able to do up until now. My third priority would be on improving the competitiveness of the European economy. Is the internal agenda. It's the internal market. It's completing the integration of sectors that were, in a way, left behind in the past. Energy, capital, defense. There are opportunities in all of this, in the sense that more integration in the sectors of our economy would give us a greater way to manage the risks. We now know that we may have to do this a variable geometry. I think both Finland and Sweden, the Nordics, more generally have a particular role to play here. Because I also worry that when we say variable geometry, we don't take this too far, and then this variation in the geometry removes the benefits that the integration will provide. So I see you as an avant-garde that can help us push in this integration that we need today. Let me bring this to an end. I think what we need is be more conscious of the connection between the internal agenda and the external agenda, invest more in weaving together our foreign, political, and economic agendas and relations. We have to put a priority on the internal market, and we need to put our money where our mouth is. I see the upcoming discussions on the European budget as a test for how seriously we take this moment and how seriously we are ready to invest together to build the greater resilience of our economy. Let me conclude with a point on the narrative, because I think this is playing against us today, and this is in our hands. We need to be more bullish. It's good to be humble, and we should be humble because the task ahead of us is very big. But we also have to show our capacity, we need to be able to project a little bit more that we believe in ourselves. I hear Europeans too often in this politics of inevitability, that we have kind of already lost the battle for artificial intelligence. We have almost lost the battle against Russia in Ukraine. We have lost it to China. We have lost it to the US. And the reality is that we have lost nothing. We will lose it if we don't start being more bullish. So let me end here with this note of confidence, with this note of capacity. We are not a medium player. We are not a small player. We are a big player, but we have to believe that we can play this role of big player today. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Arancha. We have like a few minutes here before the panel, so I'll ask you a question. And thank you for building up the momentum. That's, I think, great for all of our discussion today to also approach it from the opportunities side. If we were to build a new rules-based order and an alternative maybe to counter this wave and development, what do you think are the key fixes that we should do that we have maybe learned from the previous round that didn't work and that made it sort of unequal and something that we could do better this time? And is there any space for values there, or should it be just based on open trade, for example?
Well, if my sense is that we have an opportunity to change the international rules-based order, and do this in a serious manner. But we are going to have to exercise a bit of leadership, and we are going to have to work with partners that, like us, don't want to conduct trade relations purely on the basis of force, of strength. They want a modicum of rules. Now, maybe one thing we have learned from the past is that these rules have to have embedded in them a certain level of flexibility, because we also know that right now we need this flexibility in order to manage better the transitions where we are. We are in the middle of a technological, climate, but also geopolitical transitions. And sometimes the flexibility in the rules can give us that extra space to adjust better. So that's one lesson that we have learned is maybe to open the flexibility in the rules a little bit more than in the past, but still keep the rules. We have to work on this. We have an opportunity now to leverage all these trade agreements that we have with countries around the world, and the more that we are building as a platform to leverage our collective effort internationally towards this renewed international rules-based quote-unquote order. It may not be universal, but it should be strong enough to give us leverage vis-a-vis those that don't want rules because they think rules limit the ability they need to fight for what they think is their existential fight. We don't see it like this. We don't think that rules and institutions limit our capacity to defend our interest, but also to defend our values. In reality, a rules-based international order has values in it. Now, we have to discuss what these values are and how much we can work together to defend them. For us in Europe, we understand that those values are the value of the rule of law. We want the value of equals, partnership of equals. We want the value to be protection of our environment. I think we would find many around this agenda of values, like we will find many around the agenda of values of workers' rights, of protecting individual freedoms. We will have a lot of friends in this space if we do this as partners. So let me say that right now, whether it's with the space that exists, World Trade Organization, or whether it is outside the World Trade Organization, but towards improving the manner in which the World Trade Organization functions, we in Europe have a particular responsibility. And, it's another space where we can demonstrate that there is another way of conducting international relations. That is not about idealism against realism. That is about pragmatically managing the interdependence that are unavoidable today, but interdependencies that have allowed us to build incredible growth, incredible progress, and incredible improvements in the standards of living, not only ours, but across the world.
Thank you so much, Arancha. And we wish you a great day there. Thank you for waking up for us. And we'll continue here.
Thank you. Have a good day and look forward to the results of your deliberations.
Thank you. And now it is the time to kick off the first one of our longer panel sessions today. As we know, there is no shortage of challenges that Europe is facing, but there are some signals that a momentum is building up. That momentum, however, needs to be seized and it needs to be used deliberately and effectively. So I hope that we will find some tools for that in this next session. Before the actual panel will be on stage, please join me in welcoming on stage Jyrki Katainen, who will give us some context. Katainen served as Finnish Prime Minister in early 2010s, after which he worked as EU Commission's Vice President for Jobs, Growth, Investment and Competitiveness. Currently, he serves as Head of Group Public Affairs at Nordea Bank. Welcome, Jyrki.
God morgon, kära vänner, och stort tack till Hanaholmen för trevlig inbjudan.
Good morning, dear friends. I will be speaking in Finnish.
Tosi hieno mahdollisuus.
Thank you for this opportunity to think about and ponder the future of Finland, Sweden and Europe and the private sector in order for us to survive. Previous Finnish president said that the beginning of wisdom is the acknowledgement of facts, and I will try to list some of these facts so that we may all become wiser. The previous world, called globalization, was based on common rules and the trust that those rules brought, and it was based on shared interests. So if your friend succeeded, then you would succeed as well. This new world is based on power politics, on the politics of superpowers, on nationalism, and on selfish interests. So harming others will benefit you. So if you harm your competitor, that will benefit you. That is the starting point of this new world. The first fact is that the instability, uncertainty in this world is something that certain bodies are actually hoping for, aiming for. Presidents Putin, Trump and Xi, they have wanted to create this uncertainty with their own actions. So we are not talking about COVID-19 or the financial crisis, these problems that the entire world was trying to tackle together. Another fact is that this state of affairs will last for a long time. So this is not a blip that will just go away on its own. And my reasoning for that is that I don't think these leaders I mentioned will change as people. And I don't think that they will take on new values or new goals. And even though in the future there was a new president in the US, a different president, we know how wrong things can go. So the milk has been spilt. That is something that needs to be recognized. The values-based, trust-based, transatlantic relationship has changed significantly. Cooperation can be good and pragmatic, and I hope that it will be that. But we know that the fundamental values have already changed. The third fact is that the importance of values will now become apparent. Values are like oxygen. You don't see them, you don't detect them before they are in short order. So free trade, liberal market economy, those are the things that we still cling on to in Europe. They are in our DNA, but our partners might not share those same values. And this difference in values existed also in the era of globalization, but the difference between that era and this new era is that in the previous world, values were not weaponized as they are now. And the fourth fact is that we just simply do not have any other choice than to make Europe more competitive, stronger, more able to defend itself. My first message goes to the governments of Finland and Sweden. We need leadership, and leadership comes through initiative. And I hope that the governments of Finland and Sweden could cooperate and find such policy areas where leadership is needed. Earlier, it was said that a small country cannot have any influence in Europe. It's always Germany and France, but that is not true. We have many examples of smaller countries taking the initiative and shaping Europe. Poland, that's a mid-sized country. The current Prime Minister, Mr. Tusk, he proposed the energy union, then that was acted. The Prime Minister of Luxembourg was the head of the European Commission. So we have examples, but we now need leadership through initiative. My second message goes to companies. Unfortunately, in Europe and in the Nordic countries, earlier we were in a state of mental laziness. So it was enough that we blamed the EU for being overly bureaucratic, too slow, a body that only comes up with new regulation. And partly that is and was true, but that's not the whole truth. In a liberal democracy, the upside is that you can actually change things. And my message goes to companies. So take ownership, change Europe, because we don't have any other option. We have to make Europe more competitive, able to defend itself. And I get to do that work every day in my current job. I do this for the companies, and this is very inspiring. And I can't remember a time when the European Commission was so open to new initiatives, new ideas, as it is now. I think the previous time was when Cecilia and myself were in the European Commission, but there was a slower period there in between. But this work requires commitment. It requires that we want to change Europe, make it better. So we have to stop being mentally lazy, stop complaining. We have to get to work. Dear listeners, I have a 6-point list of what needs to change in Europe. And the first thing is that Europe must become a military superpower within 10 years. Second, Europe must become technologically independent, and I would like to link these two. In Europe, we have never tried to leverage defense investments in order to jumpstart economic growth, but now we have an atmosphere where that is actually possible. So very rarely technology that is used in defense is only for defense. Many of these technologies are dual-use technologies. So the more the member states focus on defense, the more they focus on new technologies. And here I think Finland and Sweden could be winners, because we have defense industry companies and we have technology companies. And in my thinking, it's a sort of a law of nature that this development will lead to technological renaissance in Europe. It will inspire something totally new that we have never experienced before. And then third, Europe must continue making these free trade agreements, because that is a way to finance a welfare society. And fourth, we need Europe that is a superpower in green, affordable energy. This is something we have almost already done here in the Nordics, but not in the rest of Europe. And then fifth, we need functioning capital markets in the EU. Making these changes is is easy. This is not rocket science. Some have already succeeded in this. This is a series of concrete actions, smaller and larger ones. Poland, for example, was very excited about the Swedish model, and now Poland has actually copied the model of share-based savings accounts that they already have in Sweden. US banks, larger banks, groups of banks, they compete in the European markets. The European financial system has been losing markets to the US for 10 years now. The previous speaker talked about the payment systems in Europe. That is what we need, but we also need more wide-ranging reforms, for example, in digitalization, so that we can be competitive in those industries as well. Dear friends, this uncertainty, these very negative times can be a source of inspiration. We now have a good reason to defend Europe. We now have a good reason to make Europe more competitive. We now can make Europe better able to defend itself so that our values, liberal democracy, rule of law, free market economy, could live here in Europe in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jyrki, for the wisdom. You can take a seat here. And now if I could have the rest of our panelists here on stage as well. Mikael Antel, Cecilia Malmström, Cordelia Buchanan Ponczek, and Hiski Haukkala, please. So I will start with a little introduction round and to ask each of you a question that I have tailor-made for you. So I'll start with Mikael. You work as Deputy Director General at the Political Department of Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland. I heard that you recently visited Canada. And reading the news, you're not alone with your carny fever, if that's what you're having. It's definitely a place to be now, Canada. Obviously referring to the Carney's World Economic Forum speech that went viral. Why do you think it took a Canadian to build up that rhetoric, and what did you take away from it? Please take a mic.
Thank you very much. Well, I was indeed in Canada. You could say it was a good timing. A very close friend of us. We share the same values, also a lot of shared interest in the Arctic especially. But Carney's speech, I think all of us felt that he put into words concretely what the shifting world order means in practice. And of course, it was framed very much around the unique, special US-Canadian relationship. But at the same time, the conclusions were relevant also for us here in the Nordics and in Europe. And it was, of course, it came at a time when we all had realized that something has fundamentally changed in the transatlantic relations, that nostalgia isn't helpful, that we need to meet the world as it is and not as we wish it to be. But of course, the speech can be interpreted in very many different ways, I think. And I don't refer only to the shades of darkness in the analysis, but more the conclusions. I mean, what can we do? And most importantly, he pointed out that we are not powerless. Most countries in the world, small and middle-sized countries, want to have something and also to maintain most of what we have. We need institutions. So I think that the direction of the world order will now, in the coming future, be decided exactly by small and middle powers. And I think we can approach this with self-confidence as the world's most important economic player. And I think the same goes for the Nordics, and especially nowadays when we don't only share the value base, but now we also share national interests, as we have seen already this morning. Thanks.
Thanks. Cecilia, you've acted as the European Commissioner for Trade and and former Minister for European Union Affairs. So my question to you is a no-brainer. At Davos, the case Greenland truly stole the spotlight, maybe unfortunately, but what came out of it, the whole chain of events, was that EU finally showed its nails as the economic giant as that it has been dubbed as. Then there were all of those trade deals that were published right after, with India, with Mercosur, and of course the European leaders going to China one by one. Have we seen a new side of the EU in your view?
Well, good morning, and thank you for inviting me here. Yes, maybe the Greenland case was a wake-up call, because it was the final proof that the West, as we knew it, is no more, and that the US and the transatlantic relation, as had been built up after the Second World War, for the benefit of us and for the US and for what is not there anymore. Could it come back? Maybe, but not in the same way. And I think a friend and ally attacking a sovereign territory of another friend and ally was the sort of tipping point. And it made those who had not realized it before realize that this is the limit. This is enough. Nu er det nok, so, as the Greenlanders and Danes said. And Europe unanimously spoke up, not only showed the nails, but the claws, and said that this is not acceptable. We want to talk, we want to engage, we're all happy to do that, but this is a limit. We have tools that we can use. If you threaten us with tariffs because you can't buy or acquire Greenland, we will strike back. We have a long list of counter tariffs that has been elaborated in very close cooperation with all the member states last summer. They're worth 93 billion euros. That's a lot of money. We can use them. We also have a tool called the anti-coercion tool that consists of many different torture instruments, actually, that can be used to harm the US if we want to. We don't want to use that, but they are there, and we are more ready than ever to use it. And together with also saying that we will not let ourselves be stepped upon like this, we will also step up what we've done for a long time. I mean, of course, making a trade agreement with India is not something we did over the weekend. It's been going on for 20 years, and with Mercosur and many others as well, and showing that, as has been referred to, Jyrki said it, and also Arancha in her speech, that together we are a lot of countries across the world who do believe in rule-based cooperation, transparency, predictability, civilized ways of solving disagreements and conflicts, and we will work together to do that. If you're not with us, we will do it together and with others. So that was a very important moment, I think, and I hope that that unity can remain, that we can still see that we're always willing to talk, of course, but there is a limit of what we can take from a friend. And I think that, together also, of course, with markets and lack of domestic support, really made a difference and made President Trump back off for now.
Mm-hmm. For now.
For now.
For now.
The discussions are ongoing with our Danish friends. We don't know what would come out of it. So, for now.
Hiski, you're the director of Finnish Institute of International Affairs, so you must hear a lot of this cliche and be maybe sick of the cliche of the EU being the economic giant, political dwarf, and there's a third part of this, and it's a military worm, which is then, of course, very flattering. This quote dates back to already beginning of the 90s. It was a Belgian Minister for Foreign Affairs that used it. So if World Economic Forum was the place for us to be the economic giant, Munich Security Conference is kicking off on Friday, actually, this week. Will this then be the moment where we see again the military worm?
Yes, well, first of all, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me here. And I would actually like this opportunity, first and foremost, to celebrate and applaud, I would say, the gung-ho positive vision from both of the keynotes we heard today. I think this is exactly the spirit that we need in Europe right now. More forward-looking, more positive, less scared, and something that aspires all of us to work together and get things done. I think this is what is called for in this day and age. About the Munich and the military worm, well, cliches are cliches for a reason, because they are usually true. And unfortunately, this applies also when it comes to Europe. I mean, Europe is not necessarily a military worm, or it could be if we think that a worm is an embryonic butterfly in the process of metamorphosing potentially to something more beautiful and much more effective. And this is perhaps the way we need to think about it. Right here, right now, in many respects, Europe, of course, on its own is a military non-entity. But we do have NATO, we do have the military structures, and we have the sort of the Europeanization of NATO that is now ongoing, and it's a conversation, but hopefully also a very robust process that will result in more credible European capabilities and also our ability to shoulder a larger sort of share of this defense and security burden. But of course, this will take time, and therefore I think it is very important that we start to have a very serious conversation amongst ourselves here in Europe, how we're going to rise to the metal, and of course then have an eye-to-eye vision and an agreement with the Americans, how this will pan out over the years and possibly also decades. I think 10 years is the absolute minimum for us to get our sort of things in order in this respect, and in the interim we need to do this in very good cooperation with the Americans, with the view of ensuring that some kind of a transatlantic security partnership and hopefully also an alliance will endure.
That's very nice, the butterfly metaphor, and I guess now it's the cocoon phase where we are, and hopefully not for too long. Cordelia, you're Hiski's colleague at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. You work as a research fellow, and you've written a bunch also about the EU. The EU likes to talk about its strategic autonomy, has been doing so already for a while, and it was already when the new commission started, the rhetoric was there. Do you think that rhetoric has turned into some actions during this past year?
Thank you for the question, and thank you so much for having me here today with such distinguished panelists, including, yes, my colleague Hiski. It's really interesting. I liked the comment from the keynote about bullishness, because it made me think about a story that I've heard, that people who go to stunt school to learn how to drive stunt cars basically learn how to not give in to crashing the car. Because they resist it, right? And that bullishness helps them to learn how to not crash cars. And I keep thinking about that when it comes to the European Union, that the moment you give in to the mentality, the narrative, that's when you're losing. And so I really like the desire to resist that mentality. At the same time, we live in a real world, and sometimes stunt people do crash cars. And so we need to follow policy, practice, training with enforcement, because I see a lot of rhetoric out of the Commission. Mercosur has been mentioned multiple times today. Well, guess what? The European Parliament referred that to the ECJ, and now we have an indefinite amount of time, probably minimum a year, until that comes out of the ECJ and we can do anything with it. Because the European Union is not just the Commission, it's member states. And those member states face issues within their domestic borders that lead into what can be enforced at the European Union level. And I think that this is so important to bring into this discussion, especially as we talk about what Finland and Sweden have to offer, both with their bilateral relationship, their position within the Nordics, within the Nordic-Baltic 8, as well as within the European Union. There are so many sort of subdivisions that we can come up with inside Finland and Sweden and the configurations they're part of. Now, leaving that there for a moment and coming back to strategic autonomy and what the European Union can do, something you're probably going to hear a lot from me on this stage today is the people-centered policies, way to get buy-in from the local populations. And so two things that I think that the European Union is pushing, that it will need to continue to push, is actually its focus on countering disinformation, as well as its focus on providing support for researchers. These are clear visions that the European Union have, and they yield dividends on the defense sector, on the banking sector, down through the line, while giving tangible outcomes and buy-in for the people living in the countries that are impacted. So I would say it works in rhetoric, but then when it comes to practice, I still feel like there's a bit of waffling.
So we need more tools. So we can maybe conclude that what we've seen recently has empowered the European leaders, and at the very least we can now recite the mantra of nostalgia is not a strategy even in our sleep. But then again, if nostalgia isn't a strategy, then what is? And that's where we'll go next. And there are a lot of priorities. We heard Jyrki's, was it 6 priorities? So there are often top priorities for each finger, and I think that's a bit of a problem too. So that's why I've prepared a brief exercise for us that requires you to actually choose between those priorities. And take this as something that I hope will provoke some thought. So in Sweden, you've produced this wonderful app called Mentimeter. I Googled it today and learned that it's Swedish. Obviously it is. The audience will have the chance to vote via the app, whereas our panelists here will have some manual cardboard plates. So if you can circulate these to other panelists, please. So I've made a list of priorities myself too. I think it has some similarities with Jyrki's list. It has some of the EU Commission's official priorities. But now your task, both the audience's and our panelists' task would be to rank these from 1 to 5. So on the app, you should be able to drag and drop, make your own list. And here, whilst you do that, we'll start here with the panelists' top 1 priority. So you can choose between these 5 items that are still can be read behind. And I'll look at your faces and see when you've had enough time to think. All right.
I object to the exercise because they are linked together. I can't rank them.
Then you're out of the game. No, please play. So number 1, please show your letters now. Okay. And then we have nothing. So 3 A's. So security, defense and security is the winning card here, and Cordelia is choosing economic competitiveness over that. How about number 2? There's Jyrki has economic competitiveness, as well as Mikael. Then, okay, so Hiski is choosing first defense and then second defense.
No, I'm choosing all of them all the time.
Ah, okay.
We don't have the luxury to choose. We have to do everything, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, the game is ruined.
I'm an anarchist.
Okay, well, maybe we can conclude that at least defense and security and economic competitiveness are the top two. Well, we can see maybe now how the audience has voted. One question, what did you have as your least priority? Can you choose that, our panelists here? Least. What would you drop out from this list? Show your cards.
I'll show all of them.
Okay. It comes without saying if we are
Okay, well, I think this the point of the exercise was to kind of like maybe show that something has shifted. I think, for example, sustainability. There's the whole omnibus deregulation. So we are readjusting, but then it's hard for us to maybe admit that. So do you think European leaders are ready to admit that we can't have it all?
Yeah, well, if I may
Yes.
start. So I have heard a lot of discussions that the sustainability or climate action is not fashionable anymore. And people tend to think that it's not paid attention to and it has been scaled back somehow. But that is not true. So it's true that it's not that much discussed topic at the moment, but nothing has been scaled back. So the existing legislation is more or less there, which has been created. Unfortunately, some of the legislation is too cumbersome, and now the Commission is trying to simplify the pool of legislation, leading to more sustainable economy. But EU is still a leading power on sustainability, and it should continue to be like this, because we must be in the right side of the history, and our industries and economies have got used to it, so it's not an issue anymore. But there is maybe a mismatch of kind of visibility and what has actually been done.
Any further thoughts on this, Hiski?
Yeah, if I may explain my weird behavior and rowdy manners here today. I'm definitely not trying to make fun of these questions because they are dead serious. But my concern and actually my main message here today is that we don't have the luxury of ranking these challenges anymore. And we don't have the luxury as Europeans, let alone humanity, to walking away from the sustainability challenge, because that doesn't care about whether we care about it or not. It's going to go on and it's going to affect our life, whether we like it or not, or whether we find it politically expedient. But the challenge facing us Europeans right now, after so many wasted years and perhaps even decades, is that we have to take care of everything at the same time. We have to ensure that our economy functions, that we remain technologically competent, that we are a knowledge-based economy going forward, that we remain secure, that we have global role and influence. And we don't have the luxury of doing this under the best of circumstances and with our own good leisurely pace, of which we are perhaps accustomed to. And that's why I think what we need is what I seem to detect, for example, in my fellow panelists' keynote, is strategic grit, which has been lacking in Europe. Is this sort of Sisu kind of an approach that, okay, we are being challenged, but we are not going to give in. We're going to respond, and we're going to respond in a robust manner and take the Europe forward in the process.
Cecilia, you refused to vote. Do you think we can have it all, or do we have to give anything out from the priorities?
No, we need to do everything at the same time, and they are interlinked. Of course, for survival, we need to keep on defending Ukraine, and we need to make sure that they win the war. And that is not only because of their survival, but of ours. So that is, of course, the numero uno priority. day and night. But with that links everything else, because in order to do that, we must become more economic competitive. We must address the technological disruptive issues. We must make sure that we have a strong global influence with allies who can support us in this. And we need to make that economic competitiveness greener. So they are all linked, and we cannot choose, we cannot rank them. And it is leaders' task to try to explain that it all goes together. And whereas I agree that the green transition has gone a very long way, and Sweden and Finland are definitely pushing forward here and doing a lot of things, but we cannot hide the fact that there are strong forces in the European Union who want to back off, who say that we have to take a break from the green transition because of competitive issues. We see that every day in the European Parliament, where they're pushing back some important deadlines when it comes to transition of to phasing out the combustion engine and so on. So it is a political battle, even if the transition is ongoing and it has no return in a way, because it's a matter of survival. But it's still an issue that we need to take into consideration and to formulate a leadership vision. Yes, a lot of simplification, but in the haste of doing simplification and backtracking, you risk doing more complication, which is now also the case. So it's not that easy, but I fully agree with you, Jyrki, that it's irreversible, but not without fight.
Cordelia, do you agree with everything that has already been said?
I was thinking about the silver lining to this, because I also see it as a polycrisis and everything is interconnected. But the silver lining is that it means that we can treat it together, and each one relates to the other. And that, I think, takes effective political communication and then effective policy communication. And here I bring it back to Finland and Sweden, because I think Finland and Sweden treat something like preparedness and polycrisis and what crisis looks like from a multi-dimension perspective. And I think that they have a lot of good lessons that can be integrated into the European Union as they have to take on everything all at once. So that's the silver lining, is that with effective policy and communication, we can show how these things are related and tackle them multiple times.
This question also, I think, touches upon our dependency on the US, on NATO. Maybe that's the reason why defense and security were sort of is already here ranked first, and some of our panelists also put it first. Is that key to sort of everything else? So for us to take our agency back and be independent, would you, Mikael, think like that?
Well, first of all, you asked, do you agree with the other speakers? Yes. And I was too obedient when I started to show these letters. But I have to say that there was a clear logic to it, because I think you can see this as a chain. And I have one fear when it comes to the defense and security, which in my world is from where everything starts, because without that you cannot have anything else. And my fear is that this is not linked only now to what will happen in Ukraine. We are speaking about a long-term threat from Russia that goes far beyond Ukraine. So the question is, can we hold on to the defense spending that we are now agreeing in the long term? This will be an existential question. And of course, in order to be able to do so, we need the common understanding of the threat picture, but we need a strong economy, because this will take huge investments. But as our former Prime Minister rightly pointed out, that goes hand in hand with growth. And I also fully agree that you cannot have competitiveness in Europe without sustainability and green transition. It's like two sides of the same coin. And disruptive technologies, will always be there and ever more important for every year to come, and we need to be able to handle it in all respects. I mean, competitiveness-wise, but also risk-wise. And then when we have done all of this well enough, then we will be able to assert influence and power and global influence. So on paper and on the screen, it's really simple. Yeah.
All right, so we are clear on the priorities. They are all priorities. Then onto the structural challenges and the never-ending story of having the 27 member countries are very hard to get to agree on, well, enough stuff. The Commission obviously would like to see a stronger mandate for them. And stronger centralized union. I think we have here voices for that. But to accompany that, there's also every now and then, and perhaps more and more recently, there's also discussion on the alternative structures that could be speeding things up if we agreed on building another layer. So a multi-speed Europe or two-speed Europe is not a new concept, but recently it has been brought up, for example, by the finance minister of Germany, who suggested that the 6 biggest economies of the EU should form this E6, a smaller, more agile, yet powerful club or group to make decisions faster on the strategic big questions. So there's that. There are other forms of minilateralism. In the Greenland question, there were 8 European countries that agreed to stand with Denmark, the Nordics, but also the core of the heart of Europe, France, Germany, and then also the UK. Coalitions of the willing have also that word has or term has become familiar to us, especially in the context of support for Ukraine. So let's try my game again, please. It's a bit easier because you only have 2 options here. So to deliver results, in which direction should Europe move? Option A, stronger EU-level mandate, or option B, multi-speed or two-speed Europe. Europe, start voting now. Right. It's interesting to see how it lives there on the screen. We're not half-half, but it's an interesting result still. Okay, and our panelists don't look at what the audience answers, even if you're politicians or would like some more votes for upcoming elections. I don't know which elections that will be. But may I see your answers again? All right, we have 4 A's and then we have 1 B. Let's start with Cecilia, since I think this may be a little bit surprising answer. Why would you well, it's not going to replace anything if we build that kind of a club, but it may eat up some of the credibility of the EU itself.
Well, it depends very much what you put into it, because what we have seen lately is a very strong centralization of the Commission, for good and bad. Some of it has been necessary to steer, for instance, during COVID, during Ukraine, that has shown a very strong leadership. But the Commission is also expanding on its power, going beyond actually what's allowed in the treaties, which can be good in some times, but today is going a little bit too fast, and we see a counter-reaction of that today. So the multi-speed Europe, that has been discussed for decades, actually. Internal circles, or concentric circles, or multi-speed. If you institutionalize it too much, it won't happen. Because when France comes up with the idea, or Germany comes up with an idea, it's always that they, the 6 biggest, would do it. But if you look at them, they are very divided internally. For instance, capital markets. They do not agree, these 6 countries, on setting up an EU capital market. They are divided on quite a lot of other things as well. So institutionalizing that will not go. But maybe a way to break the deadlock right now is to allow, with a bigger generosity than before, some countries to really move forward. I think that could be a way to start implementing the homework that we need to do right now, and to allow some countries, if they want, to go beforehand. That doesn't mean breaking the old institution. It doesn't mean creating new formal institutions or decision-making procedures, but allowing a little bit more flexibility to see how it goes, because so far it hasn't. And the stalemate we have now with the Draghi reports and the Letta reports are extremely alarming, I would say. So we need to do something. So that's why, being a federalist in my heart, I think for now, on a short-term basis, this is the only way forward.
All right. Let's have Jyrki comment on this. Do you think there can be this kind of a club not eating up the credibility of the...
Yeah, I think it's doable, like we have seen. So it's a short-term answer to some of the issues which we have. So I agree with Cecilia that currently the Commission is too centralized, but I find it as Commission's internal disease, and I don't see it as a institutional question, but it's more like an internal topic. I was just thinking that we should get rid of unanimous decision-making procedures, which are not helpful for anybody.
Does everybody agree with that?
Because only those countries who are challenging the rule of law type of things are in favor of unanimous decision-making power. So if we get rid of those, it would ease the decision-making a great deal. But coming back to this smaller group integration, as I said, I think it's a short-term answer to some of the questions. But for instance, this club of 6, the largest economists, if they really wanted to become more agile, I'm not that sure that Germany, which is not necessarily the champion of agility, together with France, Spain, and Italy, would be more agile than some other group. And when it comes to economy, I don't think it makes sense to have this sort of club, because economy is supposed to be common for everybody.
What would this kind of structure mean for the Nordics and Sweden and Finland if we were left out, or could we sometimes jump in and pitch in our own ideas? Mikael?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I agree also with B when it comes to the word speed, because that is what we really need, but we need also unity. I also agree that in certain sectors we need to look at the possibility to have more QMV, qualified majority voting, and that certainly goes for common foreign and security policy in the situation where we are, where you need to be able to react, go forward. And we have seen some examples of actually EU being able to do this. When it comes to the multi-speed Europe and groupings, it depends on how you approach it. I mean, we will always have separate groups. I mean, we have the coalition of the willing regarding Ukraine, and the big plus is, of course, that it then involves also important partners outside Europe. But it should not be, of course, at the cost of the unity as such. And we need a fairly strong Commission as an engine in order to produce a common end result. But I don't look at this as anything dramatic. And the Nordics, of course, I mean, here we are, Sweden, Finland. Is this a group? Well, it's a couple. So nothing dramatic in this, I think.
Okay. Cordelia, do you think, for example, if it was the E6, do you think they would find the common ground enough to make this doable?
I'm going to answer in a sort of roundabout way. The first is that I wish that we had like a select all of the above as an option, because I can certainly see arguments for a strong commission, and I can see strong arguments for multi-speed, depending on the topic and the timeline. So it really depends on the issue. And actually, right after the US election last year, my colleague Manuel Müller and I wrote a piece talking about some of the options of a multi-speed Europe. And one of our conclusions was that Europe is as slow as it's fast as its slowest member. And that allows, I mean, certainly with the majority or with the unanimity, it allows for certain countries to stand in the way. I think one of the things that we need to beware of when we create these smaller clusters is the way, or a stronger commission, either or, is the way that filters down through the member states. We're facing very decisive elections in some very strong member states in the coming years. We're facing the rise of Euroscepticism in a number of member states. We're facing real discontent. And if we feed into that narrative through a hyper-strong commission where certain member states feel that their needs are not being taken into account, or if it is perceived that there's a club of certain members and others are excluded, that can feed those populist narratives or the narratives of the Eurosceptics. And this is a very serious situation right now, because we can also see at the moment certain far-right parties in the United States wanting to give funding for this sort of Euroscepticism or this far-right populism in the European Union, in European Union countries. This needs to be taken very seriously. And so the second and third order effects of either keeping it centralized in a commission or creating sort of unwillingly the coalitions of the unwilling who don't want to be left out, this comes with political risks too.
So super shortly, what are the elections that we should be
France and Germany.
France and Germany. Yes.
But on the, I agree with you, but that shows
shortly.
the complexity of this, because a European Union not delivering is also creating a lot of discontent among the citizens. And that is what we risk facing now.
Exactly. Hiski, and we'll move on to the next question with this. There's also this kind of mini-lateralism or new kinds of coalitions and everything also happening with the trend that Trump is putting forth, also replacing the UN institutions with his peace board. There's been rumors of him trying to, wanting to replace the G7, the Democratic Wealthy States Club, with something called C5 that would include none of the European countries, but instead, for example, well, Russia and China and the big powers that he considers on the to be on the similar level with him. Is this part of the same trend in the broad sense, and does that tell us something about our time?
Well, it definitely says quite a bit about our time. That's a given, but it also says about how stakes and existential the stakes are for us Europeans. I mean, we are really talking about attempts at dismantling the world order as we have known it, and we cannot be just bystanders to these kind of processes. And that's when I was thinking about an old joke from the 1980s, that when a Finnish rock star goes to America, he loses the ability to speak Finnish, but learns nothing in its place. And I think that is the concern I have with these minilateral things and these sort of avant-garde attempts here in Europe, that what are we trying to solve here and what are we in danger of losing in the process, which is our most important facet, which is our single market, which is our unity, which is our ability to come together as Europeans. And we should shy away from solutions, however politically expedient they might seem, that undermine our ability to come together. But this is really a difficult question, and if we only have 30 seconds, we probably can't debate it here today, but this is the be-all and end-all for us Europeans. Can we hang together? And if we don't, then I'm afraid we will hang separately.
Mm. And well, the third question is already here on the screen. I'd like to end this panel with also discussing our partnerships then beyond Europe, because also strategic autonomy, independence means not putting all of our eggs in the same bucket. And we can't really be self-sufficient, so we need partnerships, trade deals, different forms of collaboration. So if and when Europe needs to rethink its partners, there are some options here that you are again required to choose only one from. So what's the best bet for Europe when rethinking its partners? A, doubling down on transatlantic ties. B, building a West without the US. C, pragmatic engagement with major powers, including China. Or D, fully interest-based, flexible partnerships, kind of case by case, beyond blocks. All right, so you can go with your intuition. It's we're not taking notes on this. Okay, ready? And what says Martin Österdahl? Some error message. We are maybe running out of time in the panel, but let's see what you voted also here in the panel. E, so that was not in the options. C and D. D, Mikael has D and C. Okay, well, the wordings may have been a little tricky here, but is it so that no one answered A? So transatlantic ties were not included, I think, in the, or doubling down on the transatlantic relations. So let's bring that elephant in the room, or if it's here already, let's anyway talk about that. What's the status now, and how should we approach the transatlantic relations after all of this?
If I may start, so as you may have heard, I have a very gloomy picture of the state of the transatlantic relationships. It's very bad. It can get worse. We don't know who knows about that, but we have at least 3 years' time. But actually, it's more serious than this. So last time when President Trump was in the office, we all were laughing, or at least not taking seriously what Steve Bannon was saying. But now I suggest that we all take it seriously, because what he's basically saying is that Trump is just a tool. Trump may think that he is the ultimate endpoint of certain development, but this is not the case for those ideologists behind him. So nobody knows, and it's very difficult to preempt the result of the next presidential elections in the United States, but it's very, I mean, it's within the possibility to think that the next generation will be more ideologically driven, and they are willing to take the US to the direction which does not remind us from rule of law driven liberal democracy. So it may end up being some sort of autocratic democracy. But this is just a speculation. We know how bad things can be. Let's hope better. So I do hope that we could do pragmatic or even value-based cooperation with the United States in going forward. It's supposed to be possible because half of the population is supposed to be supporting totally different way of thinking. So it's possible. But even if we had more stable and value-based partnership in the future, like we had in the past, we know how bad things can get. And that's why we have to grow up as a European continent and do things which are different than in the past.
So the political risks, at least, are obvious in the US. Cecilia, I'd like to ask you: do you see that the risks also apply to business as much as they do to politics?
Well, definitely they do, because with all these back and forth policies, new tariffs, taking back tariffs, other types of tariffs, the instability of the economic climate, the threats to the independence of Fed, the threats to independent judiciary and so on, it is very damaging for the climate, for business, because business wants trust, predictability, long foresight. And I spend a lot of time in the US because I partly work in Washington, and we see all this damage that is being done to the international system and to the global, to the economic system. But linking to what Jyrki said, the quick erosion of democracy in the US is really, really alarming. And it is going to get worse. Can we still work with the US? Yes, we can work with universities, we can work with think tanks, we can work with cities, we can work with states. Of course, business will continue to have a strong relationship. It is an important, and if we can facilitate that, the better. There are NGOs, there are different kinds of cooperation that we should cultivate. But US and EU as strong partners, as we have learned to consider history since the post-Second World War, is no more. Can it come back? Yes, but it will not be the same.
And we talked about a list of numerous countries were mentioned when we talked about who are all the allies we could find or trading partners. Would we be fine without the US? Hiski.
Yeah, obviously we wouldn't. No one on this planet Earth will be fine without the US. I think that must be the starting point of our discussion. I feel like I have some explaining to do yet again. This is a new letter I just invented, that is a combination of E, C, and D. And because we have to do all of these things at the same time. And to be honest, a world without America or the West without the US is an oxymoron. It is an impossibility. And therefore, I'm not ready to walk away from America in any shape or form. We have to recalibrate this relationship. Yeah. And this is a crisis is an opportunity to do so. But we can only succeed in this if we take part of our own side of the equation, which mean our things that we have been talking about earlier on in this panel. But I want to remain semi-optimistic that after some period of turbulence, we can arrive at a more balanced relationship with America, with the United States. But that, of course, entails that they have to rethink their own side of the story as well. And they have to accept a much more equal role and relationship with us Europeans than they are accustomed to. But this is not something we can ask them for. We have to deserve it.
Quick comments from Mikael and Cordelia. I'd like to bring China in still for these last comments. So it'll be your task. So this move, kind of U-turn, was kind of quick. We were de-risking from China, and now we're de-risking from the US, basically. So what should we make of that, Mikael?
Well, first of all, I must say I tend to agree with Hiski's analysis here. I don't think we should talk in terms of de-risking and cutting our ties to the US, not at all. But we have to look at the relationship in a completely new way. And always keep in mind that all the things that we are doing now in defense and all those that we have listed earlier here on the wall, these are things that we would have to do no matter what kind of administration we have in the US, what kind of transatlantic relationship we have. And the positive side of it is that we come out stronger globally, but also in the relationship to the US, we become more attractive, etc. As regards China, I haven't heard anybody speak about decoupling for many years now.
De-risking.
We are talking about de-risking, and it's an obvious theme. It goes for China, but it goes for us in general. But at the same time, we need China. I mean, we have so many big problems and especially the climate that we haven't talked much about today, which I don't know, is it a sign? But I mean, it's as important as ever. And this is a perfect example of where we need cooperation with China. And I think, I don't know who said it, maybe it was a speech earlier this morning, that they are in the forefront when it comes to green and climate technology. Okay, that is a problem for us competitiveness-wise. But for the climate issue as such, it's good news, of course. So again, I trust this letter that Hiski had a combination of a bit of everything, but carefully, always also in the case of Europe based on our own best interests.
And Cordelia, how would your selection of these different buckets and placement of eggs look like?
Yes, placement of eggs. So I liked the word pragmatic and then interest-based, because to me, pragmatic and interest-based are aligned. And this doesn't prevent cooperation with the United States on things of interest and in a pragmatic way. I think that that's a reality that we have to confront. I think that really good points have been raised about the state of the culture, about the state of the erosion of the rule of law. There are a lot of Americans who didn't vote for what's happening right now. There are a lot of businesses that are concerned, and so I think finding those commonalities are really important, reaching out to states instead of at the federal level, finding issues of cooperation like FDI screening that we can agree on. Then when it comes to Europe, I also have to agree with Hiski. I think we need to get our own house in order. I think the European Union is so much stronger when it's not being reactive, but when it is simply stating, this is what we're doing because it's best for us. And then that can be the light on the hill to whom people are drawn, whether that's external partners or then member states themselves within the European Union. I think it's very important.
Thank you so much. This was brilliant. This was even well challenged our thinking. I hope also for the audience. We're running a little bit late on time, but at this point I will thank our dear panelists. And as you get back to your seats, may I have the EU youth representatives of Finland and Sweden here on stage with me, Alma Jokinen and George Yusef Benjaminov. Yes. All right, welcome. So we'll have a short commentary from our youth jury. That's how I've decided to call you. Hope that's okay. You also participated in Hanalys last year, listening to this panel, this morning's speeches, and also perceiving the broader discussion that is going on in Europe. How do you see the rhetoric and maybe the content also having changed? Alma.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for having me this year. As said, we were in Hanalys last year as well, and we do see a drastic change in both the rhetorics in Finland and the Nordic region, as well as in the European and global world as well. And the way that I would summarize it is that we have officially transitioned from individual crisis to a system-level turning point. So no longer are we talking about individual fixes to individual crises. We are talking about adaptation and resilience, about understanding that something bigger is happening, and that every individual event in geopolitics is actually intertwined. And the way that this shows in this discussion is that when the challenge is systemic, or more admitted to be systemic, the response has to be systemic as well, both from the Nordic region and from the European Union. So no more do we try to get back to normal as fast as possible, but now we try to move forward more in a world where the normal itself is changing. So again, I think uncertainty has become an open reality instead of a hidden truth. And I think there's a silver lining to this, because this also is the foundation for stronger cooperation, again, in the Nordic region and in the European Union. So at the same time, the changes that we have seen in the rhetorics from last year to now are also beneficial for us.
And George, did something spark your interest, especially, or what were your key takeaways from this morning?
Definitely. I would say that this system change is definitely seen by the youth. I mean, in our mission, we meet a lot of young people, and a lot of them talk about the hopelessness and the concern that they actually have for their future, and that the view of the future is very dark. And therefore, I would like to sort of balance the discussion by saying that civil society actually can be a great measure of strength, and that we shouldn't underestimate the power of civil society and how important the trust in our institutions and our governments is in times like these. We know historically that in times of despair, civil society has played a huge role. And therefore, I would say that it is very important that we sort of don't forget the time frame, and that all of these decisions that we're making are going to affect future generations, and how, what effect that is going to have.
Our panel here was very optimistic that there aren't like opportunity costs to any of these priorities. How do you see that? Do you see, for example, are you worried about sustainability or equality or any of the softer values like being lost or getting lost on the way?
I would say definitely. I think that we, as has a tradition in our countries of holding these sort of very democratic and human rights focused values, and I think that we shouldn't sort of back down in that. Like when other countries and like great powers around the world are sort of pushing other narratives, a lot of people today have talked about narratives, and I think that is a very important take. And I think that our countries have a great tradition and should continue to stand up for what's right, even in times that are tough. So I think that we should, as many people have said, have many sort of things at the same time in our heads when we're making decisions. And I would say that a great way to do this is actually to don't forget the youth perspective, because I would say both because it affects the youth, obviously, but I would also say that the measures sort of become more effective. So it also lies in the self-interest of the measure itself to include youth when sort of doing these things. And therefore, I would say that that perspective is really important.
Alva?
Yeah, I completely agree. And thinking about the current dominant narratives of foreign affairs, they are very defense-oriented. But when we consult the young peoples of our countries, we see a very different layer of security. And that's one stemming from lived realities. We see housing crisis, we see mental health crisis, we see climate change, we see unemployment stress, we see things that young people are viewing as detrimentally important for our future and for our generation. So I think that these are not secondary concerns. They're at the very core of an independent Europe that can stand on their own feet. So what I would kind of hope to add next to this narrative is to kind of hold a symbolic seat at the foreign affairs table for the ordinary citizen, to make it more diverse and to remember that there are more lived realities than the one that we are having in these international forums. So as young people that we face these topics, I would say that we're not asking for less security policy. We're asking for more cohesive security policy, where security and social problems are not seen as competitive attribute, but also as the two sides of the same exact goal of a united Europe. So talking about how future-proof our solutions are, I think it depends on how well we hold both realities at once. Because without both, no solution can be actually permanent.
And to be fair, for our previous panelists, not all of these softer values were included in the list. Within the next year, what developments do you see taking place? Let's say, if the current world situation was an escape room, how would you get us out very quick? And you have 1 minute each.
Great, very easy question for a young person here representing. I would say that the topics that have already been mentioned today, I'm worried about transactionalism and bilateral relations, mainly because when this rises, the response becomes to act alone. And what I would demand as a youth representative is to do the exact opposite. But also the thing that I would add to the phrasing of this question is that we cannot forget that geopolitical changes, the foreign affairs, they don't just happen as a force of nature. We are actors, as has been said before, as the Nordic region, as Finland and Sweden, as the European Union, as countries who strongly support a rules-based order. And I think it's dangerous to think of the world as something to simply endure. We are part of the world and we are making it. And the phrasing and the way that we talk about these things actually construct the future and the reality as well. So something that I would hope to add for the EU and for Europe as a solution is to have sort of this youthful arrogance for the European Union to remember our influence and our size. So while it would be easier to hope for tensions to ease in the future, is what I see is more important is cohesion in how we respond to them as a European Union.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
And George.
I completely agree, and I would say that an escape room, like a solution to that would definitely be unity, as we've spoken about today. When I speak to children and young people in both of our countries, this question of unity is very prevalent, and I think that it is an important narrative to push. I would also like to sort of plant a seed of hope into the youth and the next generation, and I think that we, as our countries, as I said, we have a great tradition of, for instance, speaking about international law, and I would like to continue that legacy, that we think about how we continue the narrative and how we sort of give these norms actually meaning and how we give them substance by speaking about when they are not respected, speaking about when violations are happening around the world, so that when violations happens to us, the respect is like mutual. So like my last point would be that when we make decisions about this, we have to also think about how this is going to affect our future generations, and therefore like my word would be to plant a seed of hope in all of these actions. Thank you.
That's very important. Thank you, Alma and George. And now it's finally time for some fika. So the coffee will wait for you in the foyer, but please help yourselves, but be back at in around 20 minutes at 11:25. We'll start at 11:30 sharp. Thank you.
Defend ourselves with for decades. For instance, questions about globalization, free trade, stable international relations, WTO-related matters. These no longer practically exist. Recently, we've had to get to know totally new prerequisites and conditions and new rules of the games. We've had to wake up with those nearly every morning. And this is no longer a game, it is true. And we do not know what is awaiting us on a long-term basis. If we take this very incomprehensible example, that is the American president who wants to conquer Greenland and is threatening its NATO alliance and those who wish to support Denmark and Greenland with tariffs. That is something that really causes us strong uncertainty and concern. And in Davos, where I also was present, people nearly were not breathing when President Trump stood on the scene in between all this dramatic scenario. This crisis also led us to a certain type of political unity in the EU collective. Macron, Merz, von der Leyen and other European leaders were clear and showed to President Trump that Europe is standing up, unanimously backing up Denmark and Greenland. And that was applicable to the European industry, Business Europe, European Roundtable industry, where I'm engaged with as well. We also said that this is not okay. We all know what happened then. Threats were taken back partially, but the unpredictable world still remains with us. Stability has become instability. Globalization has been converted into protectionism. We have to now navigate in this world without the guardrails. This is the world where it's more difficult to take long-term decisions, both in industry as well as in policy making. How will we then take actions? Let's go back to Davos and to the speech delivered by the Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada, who so wisely crystallized by saying that nostalgia is not a strategy. A very appropriate way to approach things. Saying nostalgia is not a strategy. It is also a way to express optimism. We have to get our act together, as we have all the reasons for that. We do have potential. And we've seen that resilience in our market economy is stronger than we may have thought and believed in. And what do I mean by resilience? I mean that ordinary businesses survive better in difficult situations that we could have believed in. We go back to the COVID-19 pandemic and we thought that companies would go bankrupt. This didn't happen unless they were operating closely to the service sector. Otherwise, the system survived it. And now companies have employed more people. They work well. Things are up and running, and the same applies to the difficult times we're facing today when it is difficult to take decisions on a long-term basis, but companies have survived quite well, so this may be the silver lining in this all. In principle, the system works well, which doesn't, of course, mean that we can just lay on our laurels. This new order means that we have to renew ourselves and carry out reforms. Let's get back to that a bit later, but when we think about the world, how it has changed compared to last year, there is a new American administration that orchestrates things, but I'd like to go back to the year 2008. That was the time when our GPTs, both in the USA and Europe, were nearly the same. 15 years later, USA has gone further, and now it has a GPT that is 25% bigger than ours. Take a look at China and take it to this equation too. World becomes even more complex. Let's take a few figures. There's an Australian research institute which also regularly carries out a critical technology tracker report, mapping the countries that are most highly ranked in terms of critical technologies. And until last year, they measured 64 different technologies. During 2003-2007, the USA led 60 out of these 64, China 3. Taking a look at the years 2019 to 2023, the situation was the opposite. China was the leader in 57 out of 64 technologies. What a dramatic development. And this doesn't just stay here. A couple of months back, we got new figures, 10 new technologies involved in the measurements, and China is leading in 8 out of those. Where do we find ourselves then? This is perhaps a problem, as the EU is only marginal in this. In 4 out of the total 74 technologies, the EU is in the top countries according to the measurements. I wouldn't like to depress you, but if we speak about our potential globally, the potential of Finland, Sweden, the Nordic region, and Europe, then we have to take a look at the facts in the world that we live in, and that shows that Europe is lagging behind. We have to try and make an effort, get our act together, as nostalgia is not a strategy. We do have potential, we do have opportunities. Let's take the good news then. We have a better understanding of what Europe is and where it stands, and we then can become more competitive, and that we also heard very clearly in Davos. We can hear this message from European governments, from Brussels, and here today, before the coffee break, we heard that message too very clearly. The not so good news are at understanding our situation doesn't help us develop fast enough. I'd like to say that we are lagging the sense of urgency. It is different to say that we need to change and we need to accelerate our actions, but it is a different thing to put words into actions. As when we speak about things in Europe, things take place both in China and in the USA. And at the same time, countries such as India, with nearly 1.5 billion inhabitants, also comes forward in the international competition. Things take place rapidly, and we have to understand that this is urgent. What should we do then? To my opinion, and there are different perspectives to that, first and foremost, we have to understand that we are more alone than before, due to the fact that the world order has changed. I believe that Europe and the EU have to put their own house in order first. We have to strengthen our inner markets, have to remove barriers from free trade and free movement within the European Union. We have to cherish our international relations with many other countries too, as has been said before. To be able to succeed in this, we all have to stick together. The European Commission, the European Parliament, our national governments that are representing us also in the Council of Ministers in Europe, as well as in the Council of Europe, and as well also together with businesses and industries. Secondly, we have to invest on infrastructure. I'd like to repeat the thoughts of Dan Wong, who is a scholar, an author who has published a book called Breakneck, which speaks about the unique technological development of China. One has told that one of the reasons why China has succeeded so well is that it has invested so heavily in infrastructure, which of course has enabled then the growth and development of companies in technology. We do not have the joint infrastructure in Europe, which would also glue us together both digitally and technically, physically. And we have to put these pieces together so that our companies are able to grow and compete. And that requires a capacity to take actions from ourselves and think differently. Thirdly, we have to invest in innovations. And here we can see good examples in Finland and Sweden, which are two European member states which are invested most into research and development. In 2024, the figure was 3.22 and respectively 3.557% of GDP, and the average in the EU is 2.24%. We have to bear in mind that, for instance, South Korea invested nearly 5% of its GPT, doubling our investments. We can say these are only decimal differences, but those figures matter. They do. We have to invest more and also make sure that other member states of the EU also do so, so that the potential and lucrativeness of the EU increases. Then fourthly, there's something about very simple but difficult. It is our approach and attitude, the mindset. We have to change it in Europe. We have to understand that growth is important. It is only when our economies are growing, companies can employ more people. This creates more jobs, tax revenue, and helps us to finance the welfare and well-being that we are so proud of. All these systems that we have, the protection systems, create security so that companies can start their activities, they can grow, we can get more innovations, more technologies to be developed and make progress, and that also brings us to a positive cycle. However, such an attitude cannot always be found in our countries. We don't have the same thirst for growth than, for instance, in the USA or in China. In Sweden, on the contrary, currently it has been spoken that people should have shorter working days and working hours. And we look at the Asian countries where the development is the fastest. People apply the model of 9-9-6, meaning they work from 9 to 9, 7 days a week. That, of course, is not something that we'd think worth striving for in our countries where our society has different structures. But it is interesting to see this difference in attitude as those countries applying this model are the countries that we are competing with. Therefore, we cannot at least start working less here in our countries. Further, I'd like to say that we have fantastic technological competence and skills. And there is very much of that in Asia. In China, they make a new car model in 2 years, and it takes about 5 years in Europe, which also has an impact on our competitiveness. And I want to clearly indicate that these 2 years used for that in China is fundamentally due to the fact that they have very skilled technicians and engineers, at least as competent as ours. They have excellent designers, and they get their products to the market very fast. And that is a challenge to us, as they are our competitors. We are not those who produce things for cheap and for low cost. And our competitors are competing with such products that are important for us. That is the new world that we are living in currently. The Board of Investor AB travels to China next autumn, familiarizes itself with this system and learns lessons from that, and we'd all like to do the same, of course. How about Finland and Sweden? What is their potential, how they can increase it in this unpredictable world? I know I'm not painting a very positive picture here, and I don't want you to be discouraged, as I think it is extremely important that we'll also strengthen our self-esteem. We have to stand out, get out of the shadows of the Americans. We have to believe in our future. We have to be ambitious. There are plenty of things that we can base our activities on. We have fantastic universities. We have successful, skilled companies, fast-growing startups. Many also have a very important collaboration between the industry and academia. We have a good model of our society where people can grow, they can feel secure, they can dare to create new things, but we have to be even better. We have to get further and get results. And Finland and Sweden are on the front line, as well as the Nordic countries. In all of that, we are very good and progressive in terms of technical development, digitalization, green transition, research and innovation, our business life, our history, our value base. This is all positive, and therefore we have good prerequisites to be stronger in future, which means we also have to take responsibility to show that we in the Nordic region, both Finland and Sweden as well, can be a good example for a strong foundation. And we can also see signs more and more now how to get united in the Nordics and be a stronger power, as we are the 10th biggest economy in the world, and we can also be the driver in the European cooperation. If we manage to remove further barriers between countries, others will also be able to do the same. In other words, let the Nordic region be the good example, speeding up Europe. All of this has great potential. Our countries know that we are growing, we are developing best when we do it together with others. The fact being small has taught us that, and now we need to take the next step, not for ourselves only, but also for Europe. This step is now strongly needed. Thank you.
Tack så mycket, Jakob. I think that was 15 minutes that was really well packed with deep insight and really could hear your experience on these themes. Now, like in the previous panel, we'll invite the rest of our debaters on stage now. We have Director of Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies, Fredrik Löjdqvist. We have Senior Advisor at Sitra, Teppo Turkki, CEO of Economic Security Forum, Mikael Wigel, and Director General of the Swedish National Debt Office, Karolina Ekholm. Welcome. So, we are focusing on Swedish-Finnish cooperation in this panel. If we look at the current state of the Swedish-Finnish cooperation, of course, the ministers refer to the 2024 joint declaration that stated that our cooperation is now more important than ever. And it has been said that since 1806, this is now the time that our countries are closest together. Where do you see, is this the terminus, is this the final stop, or could we integrate more, and how much more? Could there be a, could we be one country one day, or could there be a Nordic federal state at some point? Who wants to go first? Teppo.
Well, it depends. Before I answer, I can share a little bit about my very latest observations. I was in November in South Korea. They were talking about the next foreign policy strategy, and I was in December in Singapore, and about how they're going to tackle this geopolitical change. And the observation what I made there is that they talk only about pragmatism. So these ideological questions, especially in South Korea, for example, for the North Korea or China. So it's a little bit away. And they are looking all the streams of technology and trade and so Singapore is already there. They are already in the future. They are adapted to the next multipolar system. So the answer to your question is about pragmatism, what works. So we are moving to this kind of very agile, as Jyrki Katainen said, agile world. And there had to be this kind of shared understanding about the geopolitical new landscape. And it can start from there. But it should not be this kind of great idea, grand idea, that we should have this kind of Nordic future. It had to be very pragmatic if I compare that, for example, to what happens in Asia.
Karolina, do you think there's a shared situational picture of the current world situation between Finland and Sweden?
Well, I think there's certainly a shared picture at the political level and in the armed forces. Whether it's shared among ordinary citizens, I think that's tougher to answer. But let me address also this issue about closer integration in the Nordic region. I mean, I think there is great scope for that. I mean, I don't think a Nordic Union is something that we would see in the foreseeable future. But I think there has been close cooperation among not only Sweden and Finland, but with all the Nordic countries and also more recently, of course, the Baltic countries. That cooperation is very extensive within the EU. I mean, except for Norway and Iceland, of course, but also in other international fora. So I think I used to be state secretary with responsibility for the IMF and World Bank, and there was always a very close coordination between the Nordic Baltic countries in all those kind of issues that were discussed in these international organizations.
Mikael, how far would you be ready to go?
Well, let me first sort of paint the picture here where we stand. I think if we put on our geopolitical lenses, I think Finland and Sweden are more aligned than ever since 1809 militarily. We cooperate more than ever. So that's of course a really good thing. Then when we put on our geoeconomic lenses, that's for me the more interesting question actually. How far have we come geoeconomically in cooperating and aligning ourselves? And this is really urgent. It's really an important question because in today's world, the small powers are at a disadvantage actually because of a number of reasons. First reason is that the logic of the global economic relations has entirely changed. First, so that, as we heard earlier today already, economic interdependencies are weaponized. So that requires balancing our dependencies. Balancing our dependencies in the sense that making ourselves more resilient, more self-sufficient in some respects, creating sort of reshoring critical supply lines perhaps, creating an industrial base at home rather than outsourcing everything. This is hard to do for smaller countries. We need to pool our resources. We need to cooperate with other like-minded countries in this to balance our dependencies so that we are not weaponized in the sense that we're seeing. The other point that I like to make is that at the same time our economic model or the economic model around the world is changing completely. We're moving from a market capitalist environment to what I would call a strategic capitalist environment, where the state intervenes heavily in certain strategic industries. Logistics and transport, energy, defense, of course, digital infrastructure, data, technology. So this brings back industrial policy. This brings back investment screening mechanism, export controls, data localization measurements, tariffs, of course. And again, that's not where Finland and Sweden like to be. Our business model was based on the free flow of goods, resources, data, and whatnot. And now we're in a world where strategic capital leads to flow control. The big powers, they want to control these flows. So we see a lot of friction in the economic flows. So what we again need to do is we need to band together to scale, for us to get scale and scope.
I think it's obvious what we would ideally need to do. Fredrik, do you think there are things that are pulling us apart, even though we would be ideal to?
Sweden and Finland? No, I agree that we are closer than ever, but that there's definitely potential that we can do more. Not only in the military sphere, but in sort of broader security and also situational awareness and countering Russian hybrid warfare and things like that. But I think the important thing here is that, of course, here we are at Hanaholmen today and Hanalys, and we focus on the Swedish-Finnish relationship, which is very important. But I think it's important that we need it to do this in a bigger context together with the Nordic countries and the Nordic Baltic. And I think perhaps it's the time that we not always, speak about the Nordic as the first point of reference, but actually the Nordic Baltic. And also that we need, for our security in this part of the world, also to have a much closer relationship to Poland and Germany. And around this region and Northern Europe. Factors that could pull us apart, and I think, what we need to do from our part of the world, and maybe Finland and Sweden can be the core, is to create this sense of urgency, to create the sense of what's at stake that the ministers talked about, that Russia is an existential threat to Europe, to us, to the European project, and that is worsened now by the Trump administration, so we're in a much worse off situation. And we may end up in a situation not too distant a future where the centrifugal forces in Europe will start, where some who do not share our understanding of the nature of the Russian threat, thinks that a deal which effectively would accept and legitimize Russia rewarding Russia for its aggression will sound tempting to some of our European partners, because they think that we can go back to some normal, we can start do business, we can lift sanctions against Russia and so forth. And our role here is because that will stress test NATO and EU cohesion and so forth. And here I think we have a very important role, first of all, to show in practice the things that we're doing, that things can be done in terms of support to Ukraine, in terms of increasing pressure on Russia, like we heard this morning, and sanctions, but also explaining what's at stake. I don't see these centrifugal forces between Sweden and Finland and so forth, but if there is a just to put it very bluntly, if there is a choice that we need to invest what our countries are doing in supporting Ukraine and increasing pressure on Russia, and that will, by the Trump administration, be seen as detrimental to US interests, and they will try to stop us to do that, we will be put in a very, very difficult situation. And we need to talk about this to mentally prepare ourselves for this.
That's super interesting and taking already some steps ahead. We'll get back to that. Jakob, I think, and here in the panel we do have we have the geoeconomic and geopolitical kind of the two themes that will have also been covered today and are coming up again and again. But on this sort of pair, with your experience and being pro in the Finnish-Swedish collaboration and partnership at many levels, is it still the case, or is it too simplistic to say that Finland is leading the sort of security side of things, and Sweden could learn something from there, and Sweden then again has a stronger economy, and that's where we have to learn from? So basically, do we both have something to give each other that, or is it are we on the same level here?
I think it's obvious that we can learn from each other, and we can learn a lot from each other. I think it's quite striking, the development since basically the defense agreement about 10 years ago between our two countries. At that time, the whole psychology in Finland, and I'm now talking at policy level, changed quite significantly, and for the first time in a long time, we had true and deep collaboration. Now, of course, with both having joined NATO, that has become so much stronger. So I think that yes, we have a lot to learn from each other. I'm sure we can learn from each other on the business side as well, and I participate myself in doing that exchange between the two countries. But I think I just like to come back to the Nordics for a second. As much as I agree with the challenges with the scenario of Russia, Trump, Ukraine, etc., we'll have to deal with that as it comes. I think in the meantime, we have to have an undercurrent of continuing to deepen our collaboration in the Nordics for the reasons that I touched upon in my speech. We have a lot to build from, common culture, history, etc. And I think we need a stronger point of reference, as Europe is today being more fragmented than before. And we can build from there. We can send a very strong signal to the rest of Europe and to the rest of the world that collaboration works and offers value.
Okay. Thank you for your views. I have prepared something a bit more special, breaking the traditional panel structure here too. I would propose us to do some scenario thinking, kind of just for the sake of the conversation, and push us a little bit further in our thinking. So I'll introduce two scenarios one by one, and then we can discuss maybe not. So scenarios are not the likely futures, but we'll take them as granted or given, and then imagine ourselves in that world and see. I think Teppo is very familiar with this. Sitra uses a lot of this foresight exercises. So I think it'll uncover some of the most critical questions that we should discuss. So the first scenario. The security picture dips into black. A forced peace treaty and gained territories in Ukraine emboldens Putin. Russia escalates its hybrid operations while simultaneously reinforcing its military presence along its western borders, including along Finland and Norway. At the same time, Trump remembers his Greenland ambitions, and US military forces seem to start preparations for the annexation. Therefore, confidence, obviously, in NATO's durability also begins to erode. So, would there be some obvious conclusions that you would draw from this picture? What needs to be done first and foremost, if we think in the Swedish-Finnish Nordic context? Who's ready to start? I'll start with you.
I think that Nordic cooperation continues to be fundamental. It doesn't change with your scenario. I think the difficult part of your question is the US behavior vis-à-vis Greenland and the trust in NATO. I am, despite that, and despite what we saw almost happening, I am 100% confident that NATO stands. And that the construct stands and the commitments of relevance stands. And I think that is the most important thing in your question. And then we'll just have to continue to work together, Finland and Sweden, as we are preparing to today as part of NATO preparedness.
100% confident that NATO will remain. What do you say, Fredrik?
Well, I think in this scenario, which I don't think is very unlikely at all, with different versions, I think the key thing here is for Northern Europe to uphold and strengthen a credible deterrence posture, and also defense capabilities and our willingness to defend ourselves. The trick here is, of course, to keep a cohesion and resolve in EU and NATO, and supporting us that. But there will be very strong centrifugal forces here as well, so to say. Some will insist that we need to talk to Russia, we need to engage to Russia, and there are ways out of that. Efforts to strengthen our deterrence capability and willingness to defense will be seen as provocative against Russia. In this scenario, you have a built-in, and I was touching on that, there might be a centrifugal forces also in Northern Europe, where on the one hand, our solidarity with Denmark and Greenland will be sort of the prevalent instinct. And the other instinct will be that we need to keep up a good relationship with the US for defense and security purposes, and that there will be a choice to be made here, so to say. I'm not saying it's very likely and so forth, but we need to play this through our minds, so to say, because cohesion, unity, and resolve are key here. At the end of the day, it's the kind of signaling we're sending to Moscow. Do we have a credible security, strategic communication, security policy signaling towards Moscow? And because what we need is to influence the cost-benefit calculus in Moscow.
Now that you mentioned the NBA, so the Baltic countries also, as well as Poland and Germany, in this scenario, do you see it's likely or possible that the European map could be sort of torn somewhere, to the west from Poland and Germany?
I see a clear risk that could happen, but that will also be the idea that you could give up something in order to save the rest will be a suicidal thought, so to say. And with an audience like this, I don't need to remember of the experiences of what happened in 1939 and 1940 and the various experiences of that. I mean, it's only when you stand up and defend yourself and you're credible in that you will survive, and we will survive together or go under together.
I think the soldiers are playing these kind of war games already. It's in one scenario. But I think if you look what happened after the Trump talk in Davos, what was the Chinese reaction? I mean, they condemned that very much. And if this kind of scenario happens, Europe is not alone. I think we got comments already from Modi, from India, and to China, from Malaysia. So it's a bigger crisis after that. So we don't have to, as a Europe, handle that by ourselves. And one thing we have to remember all the time that if you look this next world order, it's not against USA. It's not anti-American. Things are moving without America. And probably if this happens, we will see in the world economy and a lot of reactions. And especially I think that China will be very actively condemning that. So that will bring closer Europe to East Asian countries, especially China and probably also to India. So it's a much bigger crisis. You can maybe see that it's a little bit same kind of if China attacks Taiwan today. So it's a big crisis then.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I would like to pose the question to Mikael. So China condemning something can be one thing. Would that necessarily mean that we are not alone? I guess for China's Taiwan ambitions that could help out their situation too.
Well, let me deflect that question and get back to what was discussed before first, when I think about that a bit. I was just thinking about the scenario, and how I interpret the scenario that you pictured here is sort of a pretty full-scale threat against Northern Europe. So that means a military threat, but also a lot of hybrid threats would sort of be escalated. And we would have a contingency in the high north, up in the Arctic as well. So that would really, really test us. And I'm not too worried that in the military space, as Teppo was pointing out, those are scenarios that are practiced, and we have a lot of plans for those. But what would be tested is our civil defense response as well, very much, and our preparedness in the sort of the economic sphere, because this would, of course, trigger a geoeconomic crisis of some sort. You would have shipping routes cut. You would have energy lines, undersea cables probably cut. You would have the logistics systems probably in a disarray. You would have insurance markets going, and you would have investments. So that would trigger a larger crisis in which Finland would be very, very exposed, because we're basically an island here, right? So we would be very dependent on Sweden and rest of Nordic, and of course, depending on how the Baltic Sea, everybody knows 90% of our trade goes through the Baltic Sea. So this would test all sorts of other elements in our comprehensive security model here, which really depends on other countries to a large extent. Back to the question of China. I mean, in this scenario also, it has been interested to note and follow the closing of relations between Russia and China in recent years. I mean, there's a dragon bear really there now. They're partners. They're practicing together. Russia is heavily dependent on China. So of course, this would be a factor in this sort of scenario, that one needs to factor in also the China factor here, and to what extent China would actually help and aid Russia in this sort of scenario. So that's another variable, of course.
And Carolina, how do you see the geoeconomic aspect and the ekonomisk säkerhet, the economic security aspect of this scenario then in combination with the geopolitical tensions?
Yeah, so obviously, the security aspects, they're not really my expertise, but I agree with what was said, that I think that in the sort of the military sphere, these kind of scenarios are exactly what exercises are being based on, and there's a lot of thinking going on how to deal with that. But then, of course, it's the response of the civil society and the economy and so forth. And there, I think we haven't reached that stage yet. But, I mean, heading a government agency, I'm spending more and more of my time thinking about how to set up the organization so that it could withstand all kinds of shocks to the energy system and to trade, and also how to keep payments going under cyber threats and cyber attacks and so forth. So I think there's a lot of work going on to prepare ourselves, although at this point, of course, there's a lot of question marks of how things would play out in that kind of scenario.
And are you positive in that sense that Sweden, its organizations are prepared for that deeper for crisis?
This is an area, of course, where we look a lot at Finland. So you are, as you were also suggesting in your question to Jakob, that on the security front, Finland is a role model for us. And of course, one reason for that is that perhaps going back in Sweden, there's been more focus on economic efficiency in political decision making rather than economic security. But that has certainly changed this, since 2022 for sure.
Let's jump into a little bit lighter scenario, and this will now be a little bit more economic driven. So in this scenario, the war in Ukraine ends on acceptable terms for Ukraine and Europe as a whole. Globally, geopolitical and geoeconomic tensions ease up, supported by a renewed promising economic growth. And this growth is further accelerated by a surge in productivity brought by AI. Early movers benefit most, and in many sectors, the winner takes it all. So, what would you think? How well are we prepared for this kind of scenario, like quick easing up of the geopolitics, and how ready are our businesses for, and is there a gap between Finland and Sweden in how future-proof and ready for growth our businesses are? Who wants to go first? Carolina, maybe.
Well, I'm the economist, but no, I think we would be very ready. I mean, this is, of course, the scenario that we are hoping for. So that would be splendid. Of course, Finland used to have very strong trading relationship with Russia, unlike Sweden. So our trade with Russia has always been almost negligible. But that was a very important trading relationship for Finland. And of course, you paid a high price for losing that. And with more normalized relations, that would really benefit the Finnish economy, the way I see it. And then this thing about growth potential and winner takes all. Of course, from my perspective as an economist, I don't see economic exchange between countries as some sort of zero-sum game. I mean, if you have high growth somewhere else in China, in principle, that benefits us all. It's when you have that kind of predatory relationships that, if you see that there are subsidies or sort of state actions going on with the purpose of driving out competition, I don't think that that's something that you should accept at all in your trading relationships. But otherwise, I think, if other countries grow a lot, well, it's good for them, but it's also good for us.
A quick additional question. Do you think Swedish and Finnish companies would react differently to the trade reopening with Russia? Would there be more trust on one side or the other?
Well, the trust, I think that will take some time to build for sure. But I think there's a greater potential regarding trade between Finland and Russia, simply for the reason that you are in closer proximity to one another. And proximity and sharing a border, that's a very strong determining factor when it comes to trade patterns.
Well, I think we are not ready. We don't understand the change, what we are going on. We heard from Jakob about the figures from China. They are incredible. I spent 10 years in Taiwan and South Korea and Japan, visiting China many times. And one of my understanding is that now there is another operational model, and we are moving to that. And do we understand how that works globally or international trade? And what I talk about operational models in the next world order means that do we understand where the standards come from? How the flow of the technology works. And I just read the China's next 5-year plan and how they see AI. It will be embedded everywhere, from the agriculture to the space technology. And they are really working on that. They are putting billions and billions for the R&D and that. So I think we don't understand what is the dynamism of the next multipolar world order and how it works. It will be different kind of fragmented areas, and we can already see that there is not going to be one standard of technology. There will be different areas with different standards and how they work. So my point is here is that we are too much concentrated to this moment Europe's, and we think that if there is in this scenario, this kind of breathe that, okay, the war is over. In Asia, they see Ukrainian war just a local war. They don't talk about that. It's not in the headlines. They talk about what's going to happen in technology, competition, and growth of economy. And we don't here understand and see that. So I think what we should do is really to have a as good as possible understanding of the change globally. And also to see much more to the east than only west, because the growth is there, it's already there. The paradigm has shifted.
Fredrik, would you agree with this?
Yeah, I mean, looking at the scenario, there's a lot which is not mentioned in this scenario, but I think we have to get the definition of the problem right. The problem is not that we have a Ukraine crisis or war in Ukraine. We have a Russia crisis, of which its aggression against Ukraine is the most serious and dramatic manifestation. But the problem is not Ukraine. And as long as we have a system, the nature of the political system and regime in Russia does not change. You can have a peace in Ukraine, but it will not change the Russia problem. In the scenario that you say, the key thing is here, that means that you say on Ukraine acceptable terms, that means that we have been able to give Ukraine some kind of security arrangements that it will, survive another Russian attack, and that they're brought into the European project and the European Union. And that is a fantastic victory and success. And instead of dreaming of going back to a Russian market, which will be extremely toxic, because if the nature of the political system will remain in Russia, every dollar that we put in or euro that we put into the Russian market in lifting sanctions or trading with them, we will have to strengthen our defenses with $3 or $4. That will be a totally suicidal kind of behavior in strength. But what we should talk about, we should not dream about the lost Russian markets, we should talk about the potential we have with Ukraine and the reconstruction of Ukraine, and also the fact that if we include Ukraine, we're talking here about how Europe and the Nordics, Finland and Sweden and Europe can strengthen our deterrence and defense capabilities. There's no way we can talk seriously about European deterrence and defense capabilities if we not have Ukraine on our side. Mm-hmm. The most battle-hardened, the biggest European army, the only ones who know how to fight the Russians. They have a military industry which is much more flexible and agile. We can learn a lot from them. If they are on our side, then we can talk about a good, prosperous future for the European project. But if Ukraine falls on the Russian side with the manpower and that changes the equation. So, just let's be a little bit sober and realistic. Russia will not change overnight. The potential is not with Russia, but the potential is with Ukraine, and we invest in Ukraine because it's an investment in us, not only because we are out of solidarity, but it's an investment in our own and the security fundamentals will not change overnight.
Mm-hmm. So, well, Ukraine is at the core of our foreign policy, of course, at the moment, and it will remain there. And I think this warning about Russia also. I think is a given for Finns at least. Mikael, do you think, if you look at the broader picture and like the business base and talent investment capacity, do you think we could ride the tide if this if it is born?
In this scenario, I don't want to be too hawkish here, but even though this on the surface is a benign scenario, it invites sort of strategic complacency, because we might go back to thinking that we don't need to do the strategic investments that we need to do, and the investments in our resilience, in our technological sovereignty and things like this. So there's a bit of a danger and risk in that scenario in this way as well. Then when we think about sort of going back to doing trading with Russia, it invites certain transactionalism there, at least, from some actors. On the other hand, I don't think it's any going back to the sort of trust-based trade that we had before. And I don't think we're going back actually to the positive-sum world of economics anymore when people believe in absolute gains. I think we're in a zero-sum world in the economic field for quite some time, even though we would have this sort of benign scenario. The weaponization of economic relations and interdependence, that will go on. It doesn't depend on the Ukraine situation. It already started before, actually, the Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. And that's something that the US administration will not cut back. So we will need to, in any case, do all the strategic investment. We'll need to start balancing our dependencies, wean ourselves off critical dependencies of external actors, such as China, such as US, such as Russia, in any case. The problem in this scenario is that it invites complacency in this sense.
And Jakob, what do you think? How, if you compare Sweden and Finland and its business base, do you think both are as future-proof, or what do you think?
I think if we define future-proofing, the whole question around Ukraine and the situation that you describe, I think we're both more or less equally prepared or not prepared. I think most of us are not that well prepared for a potential peace and all what that means. It will be an enormous job and a very difficult one at that. Lots of things have to fall into place before. So my point is there is a way to go. I think what is really important with this discussion is this about complacency, because that's why we are where we are today. Complacency. We thought that the world was a nice place. I think we've learned that it's not, and there is always someone appearing on the scene. History will tell us that lesson. Hence, we will need to continue to invest in our own defense. And I come back to my point about moving out of the shadow of the United States. I mean, the US will not pay for our defense. As I said, I believe NATO stands and the principles of NATO stand. However, when it comes to hardware and people on the ground, boots on the ground in Europe, it's up to us. And we got a long way to go. So there's work and investments that have to be done. And I would say political commitment. Because, of course, we all know what happens when peace appears. We will have long discussions about money being needed in other places, etc. And very legitimate questions. But I think that this is even more important that we're discussing here. How to prepare a sound structure, a platform to stand on for the future when it comes to security in Europe. And then I would just like to underline yet again that we have this tendency of looking ourselves into our belly button and we're being Europeans, not forgetting the rest of the world. It's there, and we have to relate to it one way or another. We cannot neglect that. It's in our own interest, by the way. And China there, of course, is a fundamental piece of the equation, and I think Europe has to find a way of developing its political and practical collaboration with China, because right now it's so-so. And I think it's in our interest, and it's certainly in their interest, to develop that and find common ground.
Great, thank you. I think we have a couple of minutes for some audience questions. I think, are there questions? Eva Biaudet.
Thank you. This came sudden. Tack så mycket. Jag är Eva Biaudet, jag är riksdagsledamot i Finland och sitter i vårt
My name is Eva Biaudet. I'm from Finland. I'm a member of the Finnish Parliament and its Foreign Affairs Committee, and I'm also a member in the Nordic Council. And it's been interesting listening to your views on geopolitics. Defense and security are huge issues, of course, and much talked of here today as well. Cross-border cooperation in the Nordics and in Europe, in the world, is very important these days. But I think the fear here is that we are too reactive. We are focusing too much on our own affairs. We are being too nationalistic, maybe too pragmatic even. We have heard a lot about integration between Finland and Sweden. How about diplomatic forces? We often talk to our own diplomats, but could we have some common representation in the world? Some people say that that's completely impossible, but what would be the benefit of having a common representation in the world? As we heard today, the ministers have been speaking for each other.
In your short comments. Did we have a comment from Morgan Johansson?
Ja, här. Morgan Johansson, jag är vice ordförande i...
My name is Morgan Johansson. I'm from Sweden, and I'm a representative of the Swedish Parliament and in its Foreign Affairs Committee about economic cooperation between our two countries. The theme for this discussion was the potential between our countries, and I hope that there is such potential, because at the moment the situation is pretty bad in both our countries. If we look at the key figures for Finland and Sweden, unemployment figures are high. We are the countries in Europe where unemployment is the highest. Hopefully you can still hear me. And if we look at growth, the situation is equally bleak. Finland and Sweden are lagging behind in terms of growth. Then budget deficits, that's not good either. Finland, I think, is in the excessive deficit procedure in the European Commission, and Swedish deficit is not good either. So the EU is maybe recovering, but Finland and Sweden are not. They are the poorest regions in Europe in this sense, so very little growth. But we do have a lot of potential. We have good exporting companies. More than 50% of Sweden's GDP is coming from export companies, and I think the same applies to Finland. How could we work together even better, both in terms of politics, the economy, and trade unions as well, so that we could reinforce the strengths that our two countries already have, so that we could dig our way out of this hole? Thank you.
Rene Nyberg can keep their question in 30 seconds. I'll throw in the third and then give 1 minute per each to answer.
No guarantee. Thank you. Thank you. Jakob said in his speech that there is resilience in the companies, but there's resilience in democracy. There's resilience in our societies, and this is something which, seen from Moscow, is underestimated and not understood. I fully agree with Fredrik about this is about Ukraine. Just think about one thing. That were Ukraine to surrender, this is what Moscow wants, we would have millions and millions of refugees pouring into Europe, Germany, Poland. And this is not a joke. Elina Valtonen said some time ago that Ukraine does not need European help to surrender. There's not much to add to that. But there's one thing, Putin has so far not shown any interest in really negotiating. So Vladimir Putin is right, this war will be decided on the battlefield.
Thank you. And then I hope you have a very good memory because there's another request for a question from Karl Lallerstedt.
Thank you. Karl Lallerstedt, Hybrid Center of Excellence. And for you, Jacob, you mentioned that Europe is falling behind China and the US. But of course, it's not only Europe that's falling behind. We're having other countries that are not keeping up in this race. So what partners do you see? I mean, is it? I'm thinking more from a practical business perspective. Where is the opportunity to collaborate outside of Europe to really achieve leadership in niche areas?
All right. Now for 1 minute per each, and you have to stick into that. We'll start with Carolina.
Okay, so I'll address Morgan's question since that was about also the conjunctural situation in the economy. But let me say before addressing that I think the underlying potential of our economies is really the strength of our institutions, that we have strong protection of property rights. We have wide access to education and labor markets. We have respect of a rule of law, low degree of corruption, and these kind of things. I think that's the sort of the underlying strength of our societies. But then I agree that conjuncturally we do have some problems in the region right now. One has to do with public finances, as Morgan correctly pointed out. Some of that is, of course, driven by the need to put resources into defense, which is something that the geopolitical situation has necessitated. So there's been a strong push for defense investment in Sweden, and Finland, of course, because of its geopolitical situation, also has that pressure. There's also support for Ukraine, and all of that is necessary. Of course, me heading the debt office, I would prefer if the financing of those things were more thought through than just going out and borrow, because that does increase the government debt. But that's where we are, and hopefully over time we can sort of find a solution to that. And maybe also all these investments in defense could have some technological spillovers, was sort of mentioned here, so that could be a potential driver for growth going forward. So I mean, I'm positive regarding the underlying potential that we have, and hopefully the more short-term situation will be remedied in the future.
Thank you. We'll jump on to Teppo at this point.
To Eva, I think this is happening. If you look, when I was in Japan and Korea, they combine the Nordics. Yeah, at the talk and Baltic. So maybe we can do more collaboration on that. But maybe I raise one question as a foresight guy. We are talking a lot about the polar crisis, and that is one of the main challenges we have. So we have at the same time, we have a question about security, we have the climate change, we have the mental health issues with the young people, unemployment, we have the geopolitics, we have the whatever. So they are all in the same time. So we how to make decisions in the situation of polar crisis. And that is one of big challenge. And it seems to be that there is one way to handle that is that we need to have a top strategy, understanding the situation, understanding of what's going on, and then the vision where to go. And then with this strategy, we give a lot of autonomy to the ecosystem so they can find the solutions, find a way, in a way how in their areas they can handle the problems. But we can't take only one or two different questions like Ukraine or so. We have to really deal with all these things together. It's the same like we heard in an earlier panel about everything has to be done in the same time.
Great. We'll go to Fredrik, please.
Yes,
give it to
I think just to sum up, 3 questions. The first one is framing, the second about agency, and the third one about resources. Framing, whether Putin will be able to draw the conclusion that the most large-scale and brutal war, not only in Europe, but since the Second World War, in combination with nuclear blackmail, has been a successful tool to achieve political aims. The answer to that question will decide everything else. There's a path dependency from that for the future of the whole European project. And I think that's where Sweden and Finland, because we realize this. The second one is agency. We do have agency. But we need to understand we have agencies. We need to have this self-confidence. Europe can fix this. The size, and that leads me to resources, the size of the Nordic countries is the same as the Russian economy. Why do we think that Russia is invincible? Why do we think that Russia is winning? And then, it's industrial base. We have so far, Europe has invested less than 300 billion euros in Ukraine since February 2022. We were able to mobilize 800 billion in post-COVID subsidies. This is not about resources. And as economists, and speaking about geoeconomics, we have to think every analysis we do has to include opportunity costs. What are the costs of not doing the things right and of allowing Russia to get away with this? All of these costs will be much higher. British defense expenditure of British GDP was 2% in 33, 6% 38, 50% 42.
Thank you. And Jakob, please.
I'll then try to address the question of how can the EU be more competitive? What can we learn? I think that we're stuck in our high ambitions when it comes to rules and regulations, bureaucracy, for historical reasons. Everyone is pointing to this. Everyone on the political side wants to do something about it. But the fact of the matter is not a lot is truly happening. We see attempts through omnibuses in Brussels, etc. But that only partly addresses the question. It also adds further complexity to the issues. So we're sort of we're hurting ourselves. In the meantime, I think we need to look a lot more. I mentioned China. We have to spend a lot more time and effort understanding how they work, how they develop industrial processes, as it's obvious that they move in a professional direction. I would like to spend a lot more time on India. India is not only because of the recent agreement, but India under Modi is taking on a completely new direction, and I think it will have a meaningful impact on many European companies, talking about potential market, production, etc. Then I think, as a general matter, long-term thinking at the industrial level, which means that you do focus on research and development, productivity development, being having an ambition to be among the best in class, has proven to be an extremely important ingredient in success. And I think Europe can do more on that. Last but not least, the whole early stage venture capital scene in Europe, which is subscale compared to the United States. For all kinds of reasons. It's not for a lack of bright individuals, great universities, and some really good tech companies. It's more about a lack of capital, early stage capital, comparing to the United States. So the whole work done in the Savings and Investment and Savings Union, or old Capital Markets Union, I think is fundamental. It's not understood by many. Some think it's a matter of we have to, if we can just put a bureaucratic center that will overlook this in Paris, and the Germans will have another agency, then all will be hunky-dory. I think it's interesting. Sweden, Denmark, and Holland sits on between 60 and 70% of all savings in equities in Europe. 60 to 70% of all savings in equities. The rest are saving in their mattresses, in savings accounts, and in bonds. Those monies don't go into young entrepreneurs coming with great ideas, etc. We don't have a culture in Europe on savings in equities. We are afraid of it, not because we're bad people, but because we had bad experiences historically. So the really important thing is one of education, of changing culture, on incentivizing. That's why Sweden moved forward. The Social Democratic Party started incentives to save in equities. And the result we see today, almost every family in Sweden today saves in equities. No family in Germany saves in equities. This is a process that takes time, but it starts with culture, history, not with regulation.
And Mikael, the final word, pick your battle.
Let me perhaps close with envisioning a new Nordic growth model, because that's actually what we need. The old model was based on outsourcing our critical production, not paying attention to resilience, not paying attention to critical dependencies. Now we need a new Nordic growth model that combines resilience with competitiveness. And that means investing heavily in certain very strategic industries. I keep coming back to them. Defense, energy and raw materials, logistics and transport, digital infrastructure, critical technology. These are the industries that we need to make heavy investments in. Those come with multiplier effects. They come with a lot of lock-in effects. And the neat thing here is that no single country can really have them. But on a Nordic level, we have all these elements of this sort of ecosystem. The Danes have a lot of logistics big companies. There are energy and gas, oil and gas in Norway. There's mining and minerals in Sweden and Finland, a lot of technology going on here. So we have the elements of this ecosystem if we really start thinking on the Nordic level about this. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And now our program is reaching its end, but not quite yet, because I have the pleasure of re-welcoming the ministers on stage. Please. For some final thoughts, you can pick your chair. Yes. Great. So in the previous panel, we talked about some scenarios. We did some scenario exercises. We didn't quite get into sort of building a vision, but that's what I would now like to give you as a task. So looking from between 5 to 10 years ahead in the Swedish-Finnish context, what would be a future path or a future an image of the future you'd like to see our countries in 5 to 10 years, and how do you think we'll get there? Who wants to start?
Well, I see great potential. I mean, times are very difficult. It's a more brutal world, like I said in the beginning, but I also see in these very difficult times, I see opportunities for us to grasp. And it's very much aligned with how Swedes and Finns are. So I see great potential to tie new bonds with like-minded countries around the world and build even tighter relationships based on free trade and also together standing up for international law and international trade law. I think that we can continue to be the drivers of a more integrated Baltic Sea and cooperation focusing more on security between the Baltic countries than before. It's already in progress, but I think that Sweden and Finland can really take a leading role here, but also within the EU. I am absolutely convinced that the EU needs to be a lot stronger, but also able to make decisions faster. And here it takes so long. I mean, we say between the 27 countries, we should come up with a statement. And then we keep discussing this statement. And after 3 days, we conclude that we cannot come up with a joint statement. And then Kaja Kallas has to make it anyway. And that is not how we show strength towards the rest of the world. So I believe we need to look at things such as decision-making in foreign and security policy, and that we can drive such a change.
Yes. Would you share the same vision and maybe also fill it with more elements?
Yeah, very much so. And I think Finland and Sweden should take on the natural leading role, like Maria said, in also driving the change forward on the European level, because quite frankly, I'm not that worried about our corner of the world, even though, of course, Finland hasn't been doing fantastically well economically, but I'm sure we will be able to fix that. But in European terms, that we are able to punch at least our weight, which we are currently not doing, and well beyond that, because I think, I mean, it's been quite again, rough start to the year, right? And every morning you try to motivate yourself into this job, and you know what, you never know what is sort of happening the next couple of hours. But my motivation comes from the fact that if you ask any person around the world if they truly had the chance, whether they would rather live in a free democratic society or in an autocracy, if they didn't know which cards they are dealt to at the beginning, then certainly like everyone would choose our way of life. And I think at the end of the day, even though change takes time, so people will be the ones to decide, even in autocratic models like we saw with the collapse of the Soviet Union and all this. It can be massively bad for decades. Or look at Iran. I think the courageous Iranian people will be at some point able to have the freedom which they deserve, but unfortunately it's really tough right now. But my vision is essentially a more integrated federal Europe with decision-making powers for, or at the European level for those areas which we decide that this should happen. But otherwise, strong subsidiarity, you know, that people at the end of the day are able to decide on their own behalf on more issues that they are today. Also goes obviously for entrepreneurs and companies and businesses. And what we need ASAP, and this was in both our speeches and also what we are driving forward now, what comes to the competitiveness discussion later this week of our leaders, is that we need a deeper, more liquid capital market ASAP, less dependence on banks, which is also a massive systemic risk. I know this is beyond the scope of the foreign minister, but it's partly also in there. And there, I think the best model is actually Sweden. They have the best and, well, most elaborate capital markets, both equity and debt. that should be the model for not just the Nordics. Of course, we in the Nordics, we are a little bit more advanced than the rest of Europe also. Yeah, let's work based on that. And also some good news from the European Union. The EU Inc. idea, I think, is great, where you could launch a startup anywhere in Europe and you would have a legal entity in whichever European country. I think it's also extremely important as well that we speak of Europe also in positive terms, because there are so many positive things happening which we always forget and only concentrate on things which we still have to fix.
These capital markets, I think many of these things that you touched upon were also talked about here in the previous panel. So I think we are sharing common ground in this room. Would you also include in this federal Europe, would you include a Nordic federal union state? Or how do you perceive our two countries integration? What's the next big step?
Now it depends how many headlines I want to be making today, so I'm not proposing any, federal states of the Nordics. Well, why not? But, we are already massively integrated. We could be more. And actually, sadly, there are still quite a lot of border hindrances between the Nordic countries, even though we are praising ourselves that we are the most integrated area. So we can do more. But I think essentially we need to fix this for all of Europe. But the better we are in the Nordics, the better also for the rest of Europe. And actually, interestingly, Europe is looking very much to the north now. If we look at Berlin, if we look at Paris, even Rome, we just talked about actually in our bilateral, everybody's now looking to the north. Very much also to find inspiration for the vision for Europe.
Maria,
maybe I should just clarify on federalism that we are not there yet. I'm pro
Why not?
More integration, more efficient decision making, and a bigger Europe. And I mean, after Brexit, many said that now country after country will leave the Union. That has not happened. After every crisis, the EU has become stronger. And now we have more countries than ever knocking on the door, and we should really help them to get in. And that is a very big and important task for us. Well, we're not at federalism yet, but more integration, yes.
And on the Nordic level? Why not?
No, I mean, it's working so well. We're so integrated, but like Elina said, I think there is always more that can be done. And especially, I think that, like Elina said, that we are becoming a stronger voice. Other countries are looking towards the Nordic and the Baltics and are inviting themselves to our meetings because they know that we actually have some leverage, and that we should continue to build upon.
Maybe to get one more point of view in this discussion, I think there was a Norwegian ambassador is somewhere in this room when I find you just also,
yes. Thank you very much, and thank you very much. I'm the Norwegian ambassador here in Helsinki. And thanks for an excellent and exciting discussion on, in particular, Finnish and Swedish relations, not the least the economic dimensions. Now, Norway, we have a natural resource-based economy. It's oil, gas, fisheries, hydroelectric power, maritime, and plus, of course, the pension fund, which is natural resources turned into financial capital. It's quite different from Finland and Sweden. It has a much stronger industrial base. Now, everything that is good for Finland and Sweden is good for us. It's only a matter of time, but it is. How do we fit in? We think we have a complementary kind of economy with our natural resources. And could we do that without federalism?
Well, first of all, I will be the first one to happily say welcome to Norway to the European Union. And let me emphasize, federalism does not mean that we centralize anything further. Actually, on the very contrary. If you look at federal models, if you, for instance, compare Germany to France, Germany is federal and France is very centralized. So my thinking is a federal Europe which does, yes, have competencies on European level where it makes sense, but at the same time give very much decision-making power to the states, or as you will. But we don't have to go into my vision further, but I'm sure there will be a very nice place for Norway in that puzzle as well. Now, what comes to your specific question, I do think that here, again, I said, we can definitely show the lead in so many ways. And like Maria said, we have the leverage, but also in many ways, we have had to figure out the answers already ahead of many of our peers. So therefore, I think there's a natural leadership position for us Nordics in the European Union, and certainly together with Norway as well, if need be. Thank you.
Would you like to add something?
I always agree with Elina,
Oh, okay.
and I'm sorry about what I said about the skiing part.
All right. Well, now I need to ask, we talked about partnerships with like-minded countries, and none of you mentioned the United States once in your opening speeches. So I must ask, so how deep is the scar now that is left from the whole case Greenland?
Oh, I did mention them, but not by name. I spoke about them. I mean, the relationship, the transatlantic relationship is so important, and we are definitely depending on having a good relationship with them in several areas, not least security. And it is something that we will have to try to continue to build upon. But of course, this has been a real hit to trust, and it is hurting. And I think that in general, when people have dinner at home, they are now discussing, can we trust the US? And maybe we have to look at the West in different circles. So it's quite obvious to me that my closest circle is the Nordics. And I think that regardless of what government we have each other's back. And then there is the bigger circle that is maybe corresponding to the countries that have really stood up for Ukraine, truly like-minded with us. Then we have the EU, Europe, and then maybe the rest of the West. And then maybe we should let that sink in and then draw conclusions according to that. But there is no doubt that the US relationship is important, and that from Swedish side, we are trying to broaden it, also opening up consulate generals in several places, cooperating in different areas of the US. And I mean, there is more to US than the administration, and our relationship is more long-term than only one administration.
Something to add?
Well, not much. I think that covered it pretty well, and I'm still quite optimistic also that we have a very strong, solid transatlantic relationship, and I actually see room for much more potential also in the future. And like we see, in pragmatic terms, there's massive cooperation on the defense front. I mean, NATO is there, and NATO is actually stronger than it's ever been, not only because Sweden and Finland joined, but also with the investments that the European countries are starting to make, which does not detach the US from Europe, but actually I think will make the bond even stronger. So that's for one. In economic cooperation or trade, let's face it, an investment we are doing more or less more than ever, and I'm sure that will continue. And I think for the long term, definitely we should aim for zero tariffs at least, if not a single market within the alliance covering also the North Atlantic.
We are about to end this session, but maybe just as the very last question, I know that you've been hearing parts of this discussions here, but you've also had meetings, bilateral meetings behind closed doors. Without not peeking our noses too much there, what's one new thing you'll take away from this Hanalys 2026 and the discussions you've been having?
a secret. We exchanged gifts for the Friends' Day, which will be coming, the Valentine's Day called, but like we in the Nordics say, it's the Friends' Day. So I will be taking something concrete with me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she took my answer. I actually didn't know that our Valentine's Day is your Friend's Day. I really like the concept. So we exchanged cups, and you received the Pippi Longstocking cup, and I received the Moomin cup. And the Pippi, she says, if you're really strong, then you have to be really kind. And what we concluded is that sort of symbolizes our relationship, strong and also very kind.
And now we can bring our mugs to the next NATO meeting in Helsingborg and fika tillsammans.
And both the characters turned 80 years last year also. Well, I think with that positive note and heartwarming little thing to take away, I'd like to thank you very much and ask for a round of applause for our ministers. And now, friends, vänner, ystävät, it's soon ystävänpäivä.
Now, dear friends, it's soon the Friends' Day.
To close Hanalys, but there will be time to make new friends over lunch that is now served in the restaurant. It's been a pleasure and an honor to share this day with you. Next year, there will be again Hanalys, and it will mark the event's 10th year anniversary, so let's meet up there. Thank you very much.